Arthur Blackwynd didn't expect to survive the strange and terrifying event at sea. Even less did he expect to wake up in the DC universe, a world he'd only ever read about in comics. Armed with the Shadow Monarch System, the ability that grants him control over shadows and an undead army, Arthur is awed by his new reality. As a lifelong comic geek, he knows the heroes and villains like the back of his hand. Haunted by questions of why he's here, Arthur struggles to find his purpose. Will he embrace the darker side of his newfound powers and become a villain? Or will his sense of justice lead him down a different, unpredictable path? Why does the likes of Raven seem to be watching my every move? In a world full of gods, monsters, and legends, Arthur must decide who he will become and what role he'll play in shaping the fate of the DC universe. Hello everyone, Omni-Sensei here with What If I Was Reborn as the Shadow Monarch in Teen Titans? Part 1. If you enjoy this content, please smash the like button. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out the original story linked in the description. I hope you enjoy listening to it. Arthur leaned against the polished railing of the cruise ship, his eyes gazing out over the endless expanse of the ocean. The cool night breeze tugged at his clothes, carrying with it the faint scent of salt water. He had always wanted to do this cruise across the open sea, free from the mundane grind of his everyday life. It was a dream he'd had for years, and now that it was finally happening, he couldn't help but feel a rush of satisfaction. I can't believe I'm actually doing this, Arthur thought with a grin, leaning a little more over the edge. He had spent months planning, saving, and waiting for the chance to take this trip. And now, here he was, a young man in his prime, far from the monotony of work and routine, sailing under the stars. He was at peace. When the night stretched on, Arthur retreated to his room, the soft hum of the ship beneath his feet lulling him into a sense of comfort. He kicked off his shoes and flopped onto the bed, grabbing a manga from his bag. His eyes scanned the familiar pages, engrossed in a world of superheroes and battles. He knew these stories inside out, from the classic comic book heroes to the more obscure manga he had devoured over the years. There was something comforting about the fantastical, the idea of a world filled with superhuman feats and epic adventures. It was a world so different from his own. But as he flipped the pages, a low rumble suddenly shook the ship, pulling him from his thoughts. Arthur paused, a frown tugging at his lips. What the hell is going on? The rumble grew louder, vibrating through the walls of his room. A strange, unsettling feeling crawled up his spine. At first, he dismissed it, thinking it might be nothing. The ship had likely hit a rough patch of water, but as the rumble intensified, the ship itself groaned in protest, sending a wave of panic through Arthur's chest. He didn't waste another second. Arthur jumped to his feet and rushed out of his room, moving swiftly down the hallway as more and more passengers began to appear, their faces filled with confusion and fear. He joined them at the stairwell, moving toward the ship's deck. As he reached the upper level, he could hear the chaos before he saw it. Shouts of alarm filled the air, blending with the sound of frantic footsteps and panicked voices. When he finally reached the deck, the sight that greeted him stole the breath from his lungs. It wasn't a storm. It wasn't a simple seaquake. Before him, the vast ocean was twisting and churning, an immense whirlpool that seemed to stretch down to the depths of the earth. But it wasn't just any vortex. This one pulsed with an unnatural, otherworldly glow. The water around it boiled and spiraled as if the very ocean itself was being consumed by some monstrous force. The ship, his ship, was being drawn toward it, slowly at first, but the pull was unmistakable. "You've got to be kidding me," Arthur breathed, his voice barely a whisper against the growing wind. The vortex expanded, its edges crackling with energy, a terrifying force that seemed to exist beyond nature's reach. People screamed. Some tried to hold onto the railing, others ran in all directions, but it was clear there was no escape. Arthur's heart raced in his chest. Panic gripped him like a vice. He turned to find the nearest lifeboat, but the deck was in chaos. Too many people, too little time. The ship groaned under the strain as the vortex's pull grew stronger. In that moment, Arthur felt a sharp tug in his gut, like the universe itself had yanked on a thread attached to him. His vision blurred, and the sounds of the panicked crowd faded, replaced by the deafening roar of the ocean itself. The ship tilted, throwing him off balance, and he stumbled toward the edge, watching helplessly as the enormous spiral of water consumed everything. "No," Arthur gasped, barely able to form the words. He was already halfway to the edge, falling toward the churning maw of the ocean. The last thing he saw was the glimmer of the water as it rushed toward him. He could feel it. The cold, the weight, the terrifying force of it. The world tilted and spun, and he couldn't breathe. The ship was gone. The world was gone. And all that was left was the unforgiving abyss. I didn't even finish reading H. The last thought that crossed his mind before everything went dark. Arthur's eyes fluttered open, the light of the room blinding at first. He blinked rapidly, trying to clear the haze from his mind. For a moment, the world was a blur, a swirling mix of darkness and light. But slowly, the details began to form. The soft, familiar hum of a fan. The low, rhythmic sound of something, perhaps the gentle ticking of a clock. He could smell something faint but unmistakable. Sea salt. The tang of seawater still clung to the air, though the gentle warmth of a room replaced the cold rush of the ocean. "Where am I?" Arthur thought, still dazed. He sat up, his head spinning as he took in his surroundings. The room was ordinary. Too ordinary. The kind of room a teenager would have, posters of DC superheroes plastered across the walls. Batman, Superman, The Flash. It looked like something straight out of an old comic book shop. A shelf of action figures crowded one corner, and a half-open laptop sat on a desk, its screensaver flashing an idle image. The cluttered bed beneath him was made, though the sheets looked a little too perfect for someone who actually slept there. Arthur rubbed his eyes. What the hell? He swung his legs over the edge of the bed, his feet touching the carpeted floor. The soft, plush texture beneath his feet felt wrong, as if it didn't belong in the environment that had just been in his mind. The ship, the vortex, the cold, the fear. "Where am I?" he mumbled, still groggy. "This isn't my house. Was it all a dream?" The ship, the vortex, the cold, suffocating water that had claimed him. He shook his head, trying to shake off the lingering panic from the nightmare. Or was it? Was he still dreaming? Was the trip to the ocean just a hallucination? His heart raced. Did I miss my trip? Suddenly, a faint hum filled the room, and without warning, a translucent blue screen materialized in front of his eyes, glowing softly in the dim light. Arthur froze, staring at it as the text flickered into existence. "Welcome, player. You have been selected. Accept or die." Arthur blinked several times, his mind refusing to process what he was seeing. His heart thudded in his chest. "What? What is this?" he muttered aloud, reaching out with a trembling hand to touch the screen. His fingers brushed against the air, but the screen didn't disappear. It remained, hovering just in front of him like some kind of digital apparition. He pulled his hand back quickly, his heart racing. The words on the screen seemed to pulse, urging him to make a decision, as if they were waiting for him. The scent of salt water hung in the air still, clinging to his senses, making him feel strangely grounded, like he was trapped between two worlds. The confusion bubbled up in his chest, thick and suffocating. He stood up unsteadily, pacing across the room, looking for an explanation. Was this a game? A simulation? None of it made sense. He looked around again. Posters. Action figures. The bed. Everything seemed normal. And yet, is this real? He whispered to himself. I'm dreaming, right? I must be dreaming. But the sea salt remained in the air, a constant reminder of the cold grip of the ocean. The words on the screen didn't change. You have been selected. Accept or die. Accept or die. The words seemed to echo in his mind, heavy and final. The screen flickered once, as if impatient. The words, accept or die, seemed to pulse with urgency. Arthur's heart pounded. There was no time to think, no room for hesitation. It wasn't a choice, not really. I accept. The moment the words left his lips, the screen vanished. The hum of the computer ceased, and the room fell into complete darkness. And then, the voice came. Awaken, chosen one, thy journey begins now. Control the darkness that stirs within thee, or let it consume thy very soul. As Arthur's heart slowly settled, He exhaled a shaky breath, his mind still reeling from the strange situation he found himself in. "Now that I'm a bit calmer," he muttered under his breath, trying to make sense of it all. "I think I know what this is. It's clearly a system, but—" Before he could finish his thought, a voice cut through the quiet, sharp and demanding. "Arthur!" Arthur's heart leaped in his chest, the sudden call making him jump. Without thinking, he blurted out, "I'm coming, Mom!" A cold chill ran down his spine as the words left his mouth. Mom? What was he talking about? He was an orphan. He had no mother. His thoughts scrambled to catch up with his own slip of the tongue. Before he could process it further, the door to his room flew open, and a woman stepped inside, her face a mix of exasperation and concern. "Arthur Blackwynd," she said, her voice loud and sharp. "You're late for school again. Get up!" Arthur stared at her, his mind blank for a moment as confusion set in. He opened his mouth, instinctively replying, "I'll get ready in a minute." She sighed, her shoulders relaxing as she gave him a long look. "Are you all right? You look like you've seen nightmares. And I mean, multiple ones." "I'm fine," Arthur managed, quickly shaking off the disorientation. "I'll get ready." His voice lacked the usual confidence, a slight tremor betraying his unease. "All right," she said, nodding. "Don't take long." With that, she turned and left, closing the door softly behind her. Once the sound of her footsteps faded, Arthur slumped back into the bed, his mind whirling with questions. God, I really got teleported back in time, or maybe to another world. I don't know. He rubbed his temples, the weight of the situation settling heavily on him. But it will be weird to ask her these kinds of questions. How was he supposed to even begin? Shaking his head, he forced himself to focus. He needed to act like things were normal, at least for now. With a deep breath, he stood up and made his way to the bathroom. The mirror greeted him with the reflection of a face that seemed both familiar and completely alien. Arthur stared at the reflection, his white ashen hair falling messily around his face, his piercing blue eyes staring back at him with a strange sense of detachment. He had the face of someone younger, around 16 or 15 at most, though it was strikingly handsome in a way that still made him feel out of place. It was a face he recognized but didn't, the kind of face that belonged in a world where dreams and reality could blur. But what disturbed him the most was the feeling in his body. He felt weaker, like someone had wrapped chains around his limbs and was dragging him down. His arms felt heavy, as though he had been carrying weights just moments ago. It was as though his very muscles were sluggish, unwilling to obey him. He reached up to touch his face, the coldness of the glass against his skin grounding him, forcing him to confront the undeniable truth. Whatever had happened to him, it was real. "Is this really me?" he whispered to the mirror, the reflection offering no answers. Arthur pushed aside the lingering confusion, deciding that overthinking wouldn't solve anything. With a thought, he summoned the system interface, and in an instant, translucent panels materialized before him, glowing faintly in the air. His eyes widened slightly, though a small smile tugged at his lips as he took in the all-too-familiar layout. "So it's just like a game, but this one is familiar," he murmured, a strange mix of disbelief and amusement in his voice. Navigating the interface felt natural, almost instinctive, as if he had done it 1,000 times before. When he tapped on the Stats tab, the details appeared before him. Name: Arthur Blackwynd. Job: none title, none level, 1 fatigue, 50 HP, 100 mana points, 10 strength, 20 health, 10 agility, 10 intelligence, 10 sense, 10 available ability points, 0 passive skill, tenacity, level 1, skills, bloodlust, level 1. Arthur scanned the stats, his eyes lingering on each section with growing excitement. A chuckle escaped him, low and disbelieving. "I know these far too well," he muttered, shaking his head. "It's the Shadow Monarch leveling system." When his gaze settled on the Skills tab, his grin widened. "Bloodlust, huh? That's not something you'd expect at level 1. He tapped the skill's name out of curiosity. Leaning back against the sink, he crossed his arms, a triumphant smirk forming on his lips. "Ha ha! I get it now. It's that kind of power, isn't it?" This is too good to be true. Despite the thrill running through him, the reality of his situation hadn't changed. His smile faded slightly as he glanced around the bathroom, then back at the glowing interface. "Although," he admitted to himself, "I still have no idea where I am." Arthur made his way to the dining room, still grappling with the oddity of his situation. It wasn't until he stepped into the expansive space the polished wooden floors reflecting the soft glow of an ornate chandelier, that a new thought struck him. The house was massive. Too massive. The kind of place he'd only seen in magazines or TV shows back in his original life. His gaze swept over the elegant furnishings, the curated paintings on the walls, and the finely set table waiting for him. It was the epitome of wealth, and he apparently lived here. As he slid into a chair at the dinner table, he muttered under his breath, "Apparently I'm a wealthy kid here." His mother appeared shortly after, carrying a steaming pot and setting it down with practiced ease. She eyed him curiously as she sat across from him. "Took you a while, Mr. Arthur. Are you sure you're fine?" Arthur schooled his expression, determined to appear nonchalant as he picked up his utensils. "Of course, Mom." He began to eat, the warm, savory flavors grounding him slightly amidst the surreal nature of everything. She tilted her head, concern etched on her features. "You know, if you're feeling unwell, you can skip school today if you want." Arthur paused for a moment, the offer tempting the younger, more carefree part of him. He smiled faintly as he thought, "The kid in me would refuse, but I gotta see where I am." "No," he said, shaking his head. "I'll go. I need to attend, you see." His mother raised a brow, clearly surprised. "How unusual. You usually take that offer in a heartbeat." Arthur chuckled softly, cutting into his food. "I guess you could say I matured." Her lips curled into an approving smile. "About time." Then her expression shifted slightly, adopting a hint of disapproval. "Speaking of which, it'd be wise to get rid of that mess in your room. Nobody likes those freaks. They're a bad example to take, son." Arthur froze mid-bite, blinking. "Mess? Freaks?" It clicked after a moment, and he swallowed quickly, forcing a nervous smile. "Oh, you must mean, the figurines and whatnot," she nodded firmly. "Exactly. Once you have the time, you should take care of it." "Sure thing," he replied, with an awkward laugh, unsure where this conversation was heading. "Good," she said, her tone resolute. "Because they've been causing nothing but trouble. Those so-called superheroes. Nothing but freaks of nature, doing whatever they want because no one can stop them. And they have the audacity to call it justice? Huh!" Arthur's hand trembled slightly as he lifted his coffee cup, her words rattling him more than he cared to admit. He took a sip, but as her disdainful tirade continued, he nearly choked, spitting the coffee back into his cup. "What? What do you mean by they are causing trouble?" She frowned, clearly puzzled by his reaction. "Haven't you been paying attention to the news? Yesterday, that freaking metropolis destroyed an entire building just to save a handful of people. It's chaos, everywhere they go." Arthur's mind reeled. His pulse quickened as he struggled to process what she was saying. "Metropolis? And don't even get me started on that alien," she continued, exasperation dripping from every word. Then, as if remembering something, her tone softened. "I will admit, though, I do like Batman. He seems sensible, at least." Arthur's eyes widened, his thoughts racing. "Batman? Metropolis? Freaks of nature? Are you saying superheroes actually exist here?" Before he could ask another question, she glanced at her watch and stood abruptly. "Well, Arthur, I have to go now. And you'd better head out too. I don't want to get another call from the principal about you being late again." Without waiting for a reply, she grabbed her bag and left the room, leaving Arthur sitting there in stunned silence. The air seemed heavier as he stared blankly at the empty doorway. Slowly, the truth dawned on him, a revelation so staggering it left him momentarily breathless. "I'm in the DC universe?" he whispered to himself, his voice barely audible. The realization sent a chill down his spine, a mix of awe and dread churning in his chest. He wasn't just in another world. He was in a world where gods, monsters, and heroes walked the earth. Arthur stepped out of the front door, immediately greeted by the sight of a sprawling estate that took his breath away. The house behind him, no, mansion, was a masterpiece of architecture, with tall, gleaming windows and intricate stonework that exuded wealth and prestige. In front of him stretched a pristine garden, its paths winding through lush green expanses, bordered by meticulously trimmed hedges and vibrant flower beds. A fountain adorned the grounds, their gentle streams of water catching the morning sunlight and casting sparkling patterns on the cobblestone driveway. Beyond the garden, a sleek black car with tinted windows idled on the circular drive, its polished surface reflecting the surrounding opulence. A uniformed driver stood at attention beside the car, his posture crisp and professional, exuding the same air of refinement that permeated the estate. Arthur took a moment to absorb it all, a mix of amazement and disbelief swirling in his chest. "Damn," he muttered under his breath, his gaze sweeping the scene. "We must be really rich." The driver noticed him and stepped forward, bowing slightly as Arthur approached. "Good morning, Master Arthur," he greeted, his tone respectful but firm. "You're late again. Miss isn't very pleased, you see." Arthur blinked, caught off guard by the title. "Master Arthur?" He quickly composed himself, nodding as he climbed into the car. "Yeah, my bad," he said, trying to sound casual. As the driver closed the door and rounded the car, Arthur sank into the plush leather seat, his body instinctively relaxing against the luxurious comfort. The soft hum of the engine and the smooth glide of the car as it pulled onto the main road only added to the surreal experience. Arthur glanced out the window, watching the vast estate gradually give way to the outskirts of what he assumed was a wealthy neighborhood. "Man, I can get used to this," he thought with a faint smirk, resting his elbow on the armrest. But his amusement was short-lived. The reality of his situation crept back in, and his thoughts turned inward as the car smoothly cruised along. He gazed at the world outside, but saw none of it, his mind too preoccupied. "So, I'm in a world of powerful beings, superhumans, aliens, gods, and then there's me." He exhaled slowly, his fingers drumming lightly on the armrest. "I've got incredible power potential now, sure, but the same goes for them." His reflection in the tinted window caught his attention, the faint blue of his eyes meeting his gaze. "What's the purpose of all this? Why am I here?" The question lingered in his mind, unanswered but insistent. For now, he was just another teenager heading to school, but Arthur knew better. Whatever had brought him here, as the car turned onto a busier street, Arthur let out a quiet sigh, his fingers tightening slightly on the seat's edge. The driver's voice broke through his thoughts. "We'll be there shortly, Master Arthur," the man said, his tone polite. Arthur nodded absently, offering a small hum of acknowledgement. He wasn't entirely sure what awaited him at school, or in this world at large. And maybe, just maybe, enjoy the perks of being a rich kid along the way. As the car cruised through the bustling streets of Jump City, Arthur's gaze shifted to the signboards flashing by. The bright advertisements, local restaurant names, and the unmistakable skyline of a city caught between the mundane and the extraordinary gave him a strange sense of déjà vu. Jump City? His brow furrowed slightly as the name clicked in his mind. Wait, isn't that where? His thoughts were interrupted by the sudden halt of the car. The tires squealed faintly as the driver hit the brakes, bringing the vehicle to a smooth but abrupt stop. Arthur leaned forward slightly, catching himself on the edge of the seat. "Apologies, Master Arthur," the driver said with a faint click of his tongue, glancing at the traffic ahead. "Seems we're stuck." Arthur sat back and tilted his head to peer through the windshield. Cars were lined up in both directions, their brake lights glowing like a sea of red eyes. Drivers honked impatiently, some rolling down their windows to shout at the standstill. Arthur's sharp eyes, however, caught something unusual further up the road. A faint plume of smoke curled into the air, and there, in the middle of the street, was the unmistakable glint of metal. "What is that?" Arthur narrowed his eyes, trying to make sense of the scene. The driver sighed heavily, tapping the wheel in irritation. "Tisk, it's those children again," he muttered under his breath, loud enough for Arthur to hear. Arthur glanced at him, confused. "The children?" The driver gestured vaguely toward the chaos ahead. "The Titans. They always leave a mess behind, and they're always late to clean it up. Look at that. Whatever it is, it's blocking the entire road." Arthur's curiosity deepened. He turned back to the scene, his gaze sharpening as a faint sensation washed over him. It was subtle at first, like a distant pulse, but it grew stronger the longer he focused. Someone powerful had been here. Titans, Arthur murmured to himself, his voice laced with intrigue. He'd read about the Teen Titans before, seen them in comics and shows. But this? This was different. This wasn't fiction anymore. Up ahead, he could now make out the source of the obstruction. A large, humanoid robot, its metallic body crumpled and sparking. Its head was tilted at an unnatural angle, wires spilling out like guts, and its legs were twisted beneath it, as if it had been thrown with tremendous force. Arthur's instincts prickled. The faint pulse he felt wasn't coming from the robot, it was from near it. Someone, or something, had left a mark on the area, a residue of power that hung in the air like static. The driver glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "Don't let them fool you with their heroics, Master Arthur. They cause as much trouble as they solve. Just look at this mess. Who's going to clean it up, eh?" Arthur's lips quirked into a faint, wry smile. "Right, the Titans." The car inched forward as the traffic began to thin, other drivers maneuvering around the wreckage with exasperated glares. Arthur kept his gaze fixed on the robot as they passed it, his mind racing. His hand unconsciously clenched into a fist. The power coursing through him felt like a small ember compared to what he'd just sensed. There were forces at play in this world that he didn't yet understand. But one thing was certain. This wasn't a place where he could afford to be weak. "I know too damn well what it means to be a normal citizen in such a world," he muttered to himself, a bitter edge of sarcasm in his tone. "Or at least, I've read about it." The car slowed, and before long, it turned onto a pristinely maintained driveway. Arthur's eyes widened slightly as they approached a sprawling campus. Elegant gates with intricate designs marked the entrance, and beyond them lay beautifully landscaped gardens, fountains, and a grand building with towering spires that practically screamed affluence. As the car came to a stop in front of the entrance, Arthur stepped out, his gaze sweeping over the school. The pristine uniforms of the students, the luxury cars pulling up to drop off others, and the aura of exclusivity were unmistakable. He let out a quiet sigh. "Of course," he said dryly, his lips curving into a sardonic smirk. "It's a private school." Before heading inside, he turned to the driver, who was shutting the car door, raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Master Arthur, you're usually not this chatty in the mornings. What's on your mind?" Arthur rubbed the back of his neck, debating how to phrase his next words without sounding insane. "Listen, I'm going to ask you some weird questions, so just roll with it, all right?" The driver gave a light chuckle. "Master Arthur, in all my years of driving you, I've grown used to your antics. Fire away." Arthur's face remained deadpan. "What do you want me to call you? And what class am I in exactly?" His driver froze for a moment, then let out a hearty laugh. "I see Master Arthur is in a mood for jests today. Perhaps you didn't sleep well." Arthur stared at him, his expression unchanged, the silence heavy enough to make him reconsider. Clearing his throat, George straightened. "Well, if you must, you can call me George. And as for your class, you're a junior here, in the 11th grade. Arthur gave a faint nod. "Thanks, George. Be seeing you." Without waiting for a response, he turned and made his way toward the grand school building, feeling the weight of his situation yet again. "Junior year, huh? At least I've got something to work with now." Arthur pushed open the grand doors and stepped inside. The interior of the school was as lavish as the exterior. Polished floors, high ceilings adorned with chandeliers, and hallways lined with paintings that looked like they belonged in a museum. He glanced around, already drawing a few stares from students passing by. He wasn't sure if it was because he was late, or if it was something else entirely. "Guess it doesn't matter," he thought, striding toward what he assumed was his classroom. It didn't take long for him to find the right room. He paused outside the door, steeling himself before pushing it open. The teacher, a stern-looking man with glasses perched on his nose, immediately stopped mid-sentence. He turned to Arthur, his expression a mix of annoyance and exasperation. "Arthur Blackwynd," the teacher said, crossing his arms. "Late again, I see. Care to explain?" Arthur scratched the back of his head sheepishly, flashing an apologetic smile. "Sorry about that, sir. Won't happen again." The teacher sighed, gesturing toward the seats. "Just take your seat and make sure it doesn't." Arthur quickly made his way to an empty desk near the back of the room. As he sat down, he could feel a few curious gazes on him, but he ignored them, leaning back slightly in his chair. Well, he thought, staring at the board and trying to blend in. Step one of surviving this world, figure out what's normal around here. The class was quiet as the teacher attempted to pick up where they left off, scribbling equations on the whiteboard. Arthur sat near the back, his eyes unfocused as he tried to process the events of the day, still caught between the reality of his situation and his newfound abilities. But then, a voice cut through his thoughts. "Hey, Arthur, isn't it?" Arthur looked up. The voice came from the kid sitting in front of him, a slightly scruffy-looking boy with a mischievous grin on his face. Arthur had never seen him before, but there was something about the way he spoke. Almost mocking. "Yeah?" Arthur replied, his tone neutral. though a slight flicker of irritation sparked within him. The kid smirked, leaning back in his chair. "I heard you're the new rich kid around here. Must be nice, huh? Fancy house, fancy car, fancy everything." He trailed off, clearly enjoying the idea of getting under Arthur's skin. Arthur frowned, not in the mood for nonsense. His eyes narrowed, and without thinking, a dark, suffocating presence began to leak from him. His gaze locked onto the kids, and for a split second, he felt a strange surge of power. Bloodlust. The effect was instant. The boy's smug expression faltered as he froze, his pupils dilating in terror. The weight of Arthur's gaze alone felt like a suffocating force pressing down on him. He began to tremble, sweat breaking out across his forehead as a cold chill ran through his spine. In an instant, the boy's bravado shattered. His mouth opened and closed, as if searching for air, and then, without a word, he bolted from his seat, sprinting toward the door. "Monster!" he screamed, his voice cracking as he ran, his legs stumbling in a frenzy of panic. The class went dead silent. Students exchanged confused glances, unsure of what had just happened. "Wait, Lance," the teacher called, stepping forward to try and stop the runaway student, but it was too late. The door slammed shut behind him as he fled from the classroom, leaving everyone in stunned silence. Arthur blinked, momentarily frozen in place. Well, he hadn't meant to do anything. He didn't even realize he had activated it. But before he could think further, a system notification appeared before him, its eerie glow casting a shadow on his already bewildered thoughts. System notification. You have successfully used a skill. Conditions met to unlock daily quest. Arthur stared at the screen in disbelief as the information scrolled down. Quest info. Train to become a formidable combatant. Goals. Push-ups. 0-100s. Sit-ups. 0-100 squats. 0-100s run. 0-10 km quest failure. Penalties will be given accordingly. Arthur let out a breath, trying to suppress a groan. I was wondering when will this quest show up, but seriously, it felt like the system used that skill on his own just to force this task on me. He glanced around, feeling the weight of his classmates' eyes on him. Some were still staring in the direction Lance had fled, others looking back at Arthur, utterly confused. Arthur's gaze flickered to the teacher, who looked just as perplexed as everyone else. "What exactly did you do to him, Arthur?" the teacher asked, cautiously, his voice tinged with concern. He forced a smile, trying to diffuse the tension. I'm not sure," Arthur said, his voice light, though his thoughts were anything but. Guess he wasn't a fan of late arrivals. The class didn't seem convinced, but the teacher didn't press further. But just as he was trying to push the thoughts aside and concentrate on his new daily quests, something caught his attention, a feeling, a presence. He glanced across the room, and his eyes landed on a girl sitting not too far from him. At first, it was the subtle shift in the air that drew him in a subtle pressure, an energy emanating from her that felt almost palpable. It wasn't just the way the light seemed to bend around her, or the slight distortion in the atmosphere. It was the intensity of her aura. Her presence was unmistakable. It was like a storm on the horizon, an aura so dense that it almost made the air feel thicker, heavier. It was sharp, focused, and, if he was being honest, a little intimidating. And yet there was something oddly familiar about it. Arthur's heart skipped a beat as his sense stat picked up on the gravity of the energy surrounding her. His gaze met hers for a brief moment, just a fleeting second, but it felt like an eternity. She was glancing back at him, her eyes narrowed, as though she were sizing him up. There was no hostility in her look, but the weight of her gaze was enough to make the air crackle with tension. Her dark, intense eyes seemed to pierce through the veil of normalcy, almost as if she could see right into him. Arthur could feel it. This isn't normal. Is that who I think it is? A flash of recognition hit him, but the instinct was there, sharp and undeniable. The way she sat, the way she carried herself, the energy that radiated from her. It was unmistakable now. It's definitely her. Arthur shook off the thought, forcing himself to look away. The last thing he needed was to be caught staring like a fool, especially with someone like her. But the unease in his chest lingered, a gnawing feeling that something was different about this place, about the people here. As the bell rang and students started to gather their things, Arthur stood up slowly, his thoughts a whirlpool of confusion. I gotta finish this daily quest ASAP. I don't want to end up in the penalty zone. He gathered his things, his hands moving mechanically as he slipped his books into his bag. He glanced around at his classmates, some laughing, others rushing out the door, oblivious to the storm that seemed to be brewing just beneath the surface for him. Just as he stepped into the hallway, though, he felt the familiar, piercing weight of someone's gaze. Without even having to look, Arthur knew exactly who it was. She stood near the door, her presence undeniable in the sea of students moving around her. The girl. Their eyes met once again, and Arthur's breath caught in his throat for a moment. There was something unspoken in the way she looked at him, like a challenge wrapped in a mystery. She was standing there, waiting for him. He was sure of it. "Arthur Blackwynd," she said, her voice calm but unwavering, cutting through the noise of the bustling students. "We need to talk." While pointing toward the track outside, Arthur raised an eyebrow, caught off guard by her directness. His instinct was to crack a joke, anything to break the tension. He couldn't help but let a sarcastic smile slip onto his face as he replied, "We have PE now, how convenient." But her expression didn't shift. She didn't laugh or even acknowledge his attempt at humor. Instead, she just pointed toward the track outside. It was as if she had heard the words, but they meant nothing. All that mattered now was what came next. Without waiting for his response, she turned and started walking, her pace measured and purposeful, as though this was something that had already been decided long before Arthur had even stepped out of the classroom. Arthur watched her for a moment, the sarcasm still hanging on his lips, but quickly fading. There was no denying it now. She wasn't here to chat or make small talk. She was here for something serious. Arthur, with a sigh, he shook his head, his feet following her without a second thought. This was no longer about getting through the day or finishing his quest. Something about her, about this situation, felt too important to ignore. The track was just ahead, an open stretch of pavement surrounded by the wide, green expanse of the field. The sound of the students' footsteps seemed muffled as Arthur's thoughts raced. What does she want with me? He caught up to her quickly, matching her stride, though he couldn't shake the feeling that she had been expecting him to follow all along. Arthur followed her in silence, the sound of their footsteps crunching against the gravel path, the only thing breaking the stillness. The track had thinned out, the distant noise of students fading away until they reached a more secluded area shielded by trees. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on the ground. She stopped abruptly, turning around to face him. "This place is safe," she said, her voice low but firm, her violet eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made Arthur stand straighter. Arthur raised an eyebrow, already sensing this was no ordinary conversation. Before he could say anything, she cut straight to the point. "Now, Arthur," she began, crossing her arms. "Speak. What and who exactly are you?" Arthur blinked, caught slightly off guard by her directness. "Well, my name is Arthur." "Cut the crap," she interrupted, her tone sharper now. "I sensed a great darkness from you earlier. What is that? And I'm asking again, who exactly are you?" Arthur looked at her for a moment, a wry smile creeping onto his face. "Strange, isn't it? But I know who you are," he said, his tone calm but edged with something unreadable. "You're a raven, aren't you? Hiding that gem in your forehead isn't exactly working on me." Raven's eyes widened slightly, her composure slipping for the briefest of moments before she regained it. Arthur smirked at her reaction. "In fact," he added, "you're the one I sense darkness from. You might want to work on that, by the way." Raven narrowed her eyes at him. "You're hiding something," Arthur sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm not sharing everything with her," he thought. "It's true," he said aloud. "I have powers, but I'm only figuring it out as I go. That's all I can tell you right now." Raven didn't look convinced. She studied him for a moment, her gaze unwavering, before finally speaking. "Well, you won't be the first in this school," she said, her voice even. "But you do realize I'll have to report you to the Titans, right?" Arthur chuckled, shaking his head. "Sure," he said, his tone almost playful. "As long as I don't cause trouble, I guess I'm one of the good guys in your eyes. But wait," he paused, his expression shifting to something more curious. "What do you mean I'm not the only one in this school? There are others with abilities here?" "Of course," Raven replied, her tone guarded. "But that's all I can say to you." Arthur tilted his head slightly, piecing things together. "Hold on," he said, his smirk returning. "It was you, wasn't it? You're the one who destroyed that robot on the road earlier. Bold of you to assume I'd cause trouble when I basically got here late thanks to you. Raven's face flushed slightly, a rare hint of embarrassment creeping into her usually stoic demeanor. I just wanted to confirm this myself, she said, her voice quieter. Arthur raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Raven hesitated for a moment, her piercing gaze locked onto Arthur. Finally, she spoke, her tone calm but carrying a weight of authority. Very well, she said. I won't report anything. Yet. But I'll keep an eye on you myself. Arthur raised an eyebrow caught between gratitude and unease. I appreciate it. I guess, he said, his tone tinged with sarcasm but not entirely insincere. Raven smirked faintly, turning to leave. She took a few steps before glancing over her shoulder, her violet eyes gleaming with something unreadable. You know, she said, her voice softer but still deliberate, if you're strong enough, you could even join us. Arthur blinked, momentarily stunned. He opened his mouth to respond, but she didn't wait for an answer. Be seeing you, Arthur, she said, her tone more neutral again as she turned to leave, disappearing down the path with a fluid grace that left him standing there in silence. Arthur shook his head with a half-smile. Join the Titans? He thought. Well, that's one way to make a first impression, but I don't think I want that. Already on the watch list of someone as formidable as her. He paused for a moment, his smirk growing wider. Gotta say, though, if someone's gonna keep an eye on me, it might as well be a hottie like Raven. With a deep breath, he glanced at the track, the open expanse stretching out before him. I need to use this track anyway, he muttered to himself, rolling his shoulders. Time to start this daily quest. Arthur lay flat on the track, his chest heaving as though his lungs were trying to escape his body. Sweat drenched his shirt, sticking it to his skin like a second layer, and his face was a mix of pale exhaustion and sheer determination. His abs screamed in protest, his legs wobbled like gelatin, and his arms felt like noodles. 97, 98, he gasped, dragging his body up inch by agonizing inch. His teeth clenched as he fell back down, staring up at the sky. Why did I do the 10-kilometer run first? Why? He cursed internally, his muscles barely cooperating. A few students passing by paused to watch, whispering among themselves. Look at him, he's been at it for hours, one said, eyes wide with disbelief. Is he trying to kill himself or something? Another added, shaking their head. That guy's either crazy or training to join the Olympics, someone muttered. Arthur groaned, ignoring the chatter. His focus was singular, tunnel vision, locking onto one goal. Finish the damn sit-ups. 99, he rasped, his voice barely audible. His arms trembled as he pushed himself up one final time, every fiber of his being screamed in protest. 100, he shouted, collapsing onto his back with the dramatic flair of a hero falling in battle. The sideline spectators broke into scattered applause, half amused, half impressed. He actually did it, one of them said in awe. Yeah, but is he alive? Should we call someone? Another joked. Arthur blinked up at the sky, feeling the sweet embrace of death, or maybe just exhaustion. But before he could dwell on his misery, a familiar ding echoed in his mind. Daily quest. Completed. You leveled up. Rewards granted. Choose one. Plus 5 ability points. Blessed loot box full recovery. Arthur's lips twitched into a weak smile, his exhaustion temporarily forgotten. Leveled up, huh? Finally, some good news, he muttered, reading the options. Let's see. Ability points are tempting. The loot box could be fun, and I might get those dungeon keys if they exist in this world, but... He glanced at his trembling limbs, remembering the hellish workout. Yeah, no contest. For now, I need this, otherwise I won't be able to walk. I can get the other rewards once I get used to this hellish workout. The words floated in front of his vision like a gift from the heavens. He let out a weak chuckle, his lips curling into a lopsided grin. Full recovery, he muttered to himself. As soon as he activated the reward, a rush of energy coursed through his body. His aching muscles relaxed, his fatigue vanished, and he felt as if he had just woken up from the best nap of his life. Arthur sprang to his feet, startling the onlookers. What the hell? He was dying a second ago, one of them exclaimed. Is this guy a cyborg or something? Another asked, squinting suspiciously. Arthur smirked, rolling his shoulders. Not a bad warm-up, he said to himself, brushing the dust off his pants. He glanced at the track. Next time, I'm doing the sit-ups first, he thought, with a wry grin, striding away with the energy of someone who hadn't just been on the brink of collapse moments ago. Arthur stepped out of the school building, the weight of the day settling on his shoulders. It had been an eventful one. Meeting Raven, checking out my powers. His thoughts were a storm, but as he stepped into the bustling streets, the momentary chaos of his surroundings helped ground him. Still, beyond that, I didn't notice anyone else who seemed out of the ordinary. He couldn't shake the lingering doubt Raven's words had sparked in him. Was she telling the truth? Or was she just a wary person sensing shadows in everyone? He glanced around, seeing nothing that stood out. No one else had given off that same vibe she had. He thought about it for a moment, but decided against dwelling too much on it. I'll figure this out in my own time. As he walked toward the school's front gates, his eyes landed on George, standing beside a sleek black car parked at the curb. The older man was waiting patiently, his hands clasped behind his back as he leaned slightly against the vehicle. His expression was stoic, yet there was a hint of something unreadable in his gaze. Arthur walked up to him, his feet crunching against the pavement with each step. "George," he called out, his voice casual but firm. "You can go ahead. I'll go back on my own today. Got some business to take care of." George straightened up at the sound of his voice, his lips twitching into a small, understanding smile. "Master Arthur, you know I can't do that," he replied, voice full of gentle admonishment. "Your mother would be very displeased." Arthur sighed, trying to hide the frustration that bubbled beneath the surface. "I insist. You don't have to worry about her." He gestured vaguely in the air, like it was nothing. "I'll be fine, really." George's smile grew slightly. "It's not your mother I'm worried about, Master Arthur. It's your brother," he said, his tone light but with a tinge of concern. Arthur blinked, his steps faltering for a moment. Brother? He hadn't thought about it much. The mention of a sibling was very strange. "Guess it makes sense. I would have some here." But as quickly as the thought came, it was gone. Arthur shook his head slightly, clearing his mind. "Oh well," he muttered to himself, watching as George bowed his head politely and slipped into the car, driving off down the road. Arthur stood there for a moment, watching the car disappear into the distance, before turning to take in the view of the city around him. The towering buildings, the neon lights flashing from shop windows, the busy sidewalks filled with people hurrying to and from their destinations. It was overwhelming, in a way. The sense of normalcy in the chaos of it all. This city, it's so big, and so loud. He walked slowly, letting the sights, sounds, and even the smells of the urban sprawl sink in. I need to get more familiar with my surroundings. This place feels alien. As he walked, though, his mind drifted. Still, everything looks like where I'm from, ordinary, for a place where superhumans walk. His senses were already alert to his surroundings, but it didn't take long for the dark side of the city to present itself to him. The more he observed, the more he began to notice crime everywhere. People in hurried conversations, their words sharp and clipped. Little pockets of conflict cropping up around him. An argument over a purse. A man trying to sell something suspiciously from a bag. But even worse, there were more dangerous things lurking in the shadows. Desperate figures, dangerous deals. A general air of lawlessness that seemed to linger despite the presence of capes and masked vigilantes. For a place where superhumans roam freely, it's still very much the same. Chaos rules. It was almost like a dark irony. Powers were supposed to bring order, but in a city like this, the people with power weren't always the ones keeping the peace. Arthur grimaced slightly, feeling the weight of that truth sit heavily on him. As he continued walking, lost in his thoughts, something caught his eye. Movement in the alleyway ahead. A figure, a woman, seemed to be in trouble. Arthur's senses sharpened, and without thinking, he quickened his pace toward the sound of low voices. His blood pulsed in his veins, his instincts kicking in. A couple of men, rough-looking with their jackets pulled low over their heads, were standing in front of the woman, blocking her path. She was backed up against the cold brick wall, her hands clutching her purse to her chest in desperation. One of the men was making menacing gestures, clearly trying to intimidate her into handing it over. "Hey," one of them sneered, "you want to give that up easy, or do we make this difficult?" Something inside Arthur snapped. Without thinking, his bloodlust swirled to the surface like a burning tide. He wasn't aware of his own eyes glowing, but the strange power that had stirred within him was undeniable. He moved quickly, almost instinctively, closing the gap between him and the thugs before they could even register his presence. I was hoping to find someone to test my current strength. The two thugs were so focused on the woman that they didn't notice Arthur closing in on them until it was almost too late. As he stepped into the alley, his presence seemed to disrupt the air itself. One of the men, a scruffy figure with a scarred face, turned at the sound of footsteps, his hand instinctively going for the knife at his side. The other followed suit, reaching into his jacket. Their eyes widened when they saw Arthur standing there, calm as ever, unarmed. "What the hell?" the scarred thug growled. "What's a kid doing here?" "None of your business," Arthur said, his voice cold and steady, his eyes fixed on the thugs like a predator sizing up its prey. His stance was casual, but there was an aura of danger that surrounded him. The thug with the unkempt beard scoffed, sneering. "Kid's got guts, I'll give him that. But you're about to regret this, punk." The first thug lunged, his knife flashing in the dim alley light. With practiced speed, Arthur sidestepped the attack, feeling the blade cut through the air just inches from his face. The thug's momentum carried him forward, but Arthur's foot swung up in a perfect arc, slamming into the thug's side with such force that he crashed into the wall, gasping for breath. Before the second thug could react, Arthur was already on him. He grabbed the thug's wrist mid-strike, the knife barely grazing his skin as he twisted the man's arm with brutal efficiency. With a snap of his wrist, Arthur forced the weapon to drop, sending the thug stumbling back. The thug's eyes widened, disbelief flashing across his face. "You," the thug began, but Arthur's fist collided with his jaw before he could finish the sentence. The punch was like a wrecking ball, sending the thug sprawling onto the ground, his body crumpling in a heap. "Pathetic," Arthur muttered under his breath, the adrenaline coursing through him as he moved effortlessly between the two men. The first thug, still trying to regain his bearings, lunged at Arthur again, but the young man was already steps ahead. He ducked under the wild slash, stepping into the thug's guard. Before the thug could react, Arthur's knee connected with his abdomen, knocking the wind out of him. He gasped, unable to speak, and Arthur's fist came down like a hammer, smashing into the thug's temple with a sickening thud. "Bastard!" the second thug yelled, stumbling to his feet with a feral snarl. He grabbed a nearby bottle and swung it at Arthur's head. Arthur ducked, then sidestepped, letting the thugs swing past harmlessly by. "You're really making this harder on yourselves," Arthur said, his voice dripping with contempt. The thug growled and attempted a desperate charge, but Arthur was too fast. He sidestepped again, and before the thug could react, Arthur slammed his elbow into the back of his neck with all his strength. There was a sickening crack, and the thug collapsed to the ground, unconscious before he could even scream. Arthur took a step back, wiping his hands off. He turned toward the woman in the corner, who was still hiding, wide-eyed, her back pressed against the wall. "Are you okay?" Arthur asked, his voice softer now. He was about to take a step toward her, but his instincts flared just in time. A flash of steel caught his eye, and without thinking, he twisted his body and ducked, narrowly avoiding the blade of a third thug who had emerged from the shadows. The man's knife sliced through the air, just grazing the sleeve of Arthur's shirt. Arthur's heart raced, but his movements were fluid, controlled. He shifted his weight, using his agility to his advantage. He spun around, grabbed the thug's wrist mid-swing, and with a sharp twist, he snapped the man's neck with a brutal, practiced kick to the back. The thug crumpled to the ground like a rag doll, lifeless before he even hit the pavement. Arthur stood over him, breathing slightly heavier now, but still calm. His eyes moved back to the woman, who was now staring at him with a mix of awe and fear. The alley was silent once more, save for the distant hum of the city and the soft, panicked breathing of the woman. Arthur walked over to her, his expression unreadable. "You okay?" he repeated, his tone gentler now. She nodded, her voice shaky. I don't know what to say." "Don't mention it," Arthur said, glancing down at the thugs. "I was just passing through." He turned away, his senses alert, but before he could leave, something caught his attention. He looked over his shoulder one last time. "Just be careful next time," Arthur said with a slight nod, his eyes softening for a moment before he disappeared into the shadows of the alley, leaving the woman in stunned silence behind him. Arthur paused in his tracks as a new notification flickered across his vision, glowing faintly in the dimly lit street. Title earned, Bane of the Unworthy. Description: your actions have marked you as a harbinger of retribution. Criminals and wrongdoers tremble in your presence. Attack power against thugs and evildoers increased by plus 20%. He exhaled sharply, muttering to himself, "Bane of the Unworthy, huh? Sounds dramatic, but I guess it fits." Another notification followed, demanding his attention. New reward unlocked, weapon selection, choose your weapon, gauntlets of the lowborn. Dagger of the lowborn. Sword of the lowborn. Great sword of the lowborn. Arthur's eyes immediately landed on the last option, his lips curled into a small smirk. A great sword, huh? Now that's my kind of style. Big, bold, and intimidating. He selected it without hesitation, and a faint shimmer of light appeared before him. Slowly, a massive blade materialized, its hilt wrapped in dark leather, with intricate carvings running along the blade's length. Despite its size, it looked perfectly balanced, exuding raw power. The system chimed again. You have equipped. Great Sword of the Lowborn. Description. A weapon forged for those who rise from nothing to challenge the mighty. Wielded with pride, it symbolizes strength through hardship. Arthur took hold of the weapon. It felt cold and heavy in his hands, but he knew instinctively that it could deliver devastating force with ease. Yet, something about the name made him pause. Of the lowborn, he thought, his smirk fading. Turning the weapon over in his hands, he said quietly to himself, "How ironic. In this world, I'm highborn, living in a mansion, attending a private school, and driven around in a fancy car. Yet the system gives me a weapon that screams, 'Rise from nothing.' What are you trying to say, huh?" Arthur took a deep breath, gripping the massive greatsword in his hands as he admired its intricate design. The blade seemed to hum faintly with latent power, and for a moment he couldn't help but marvel at the craftsmanship. But then reality hit him. Yeah, this thing is awesome, but walking around with a massive sword on my back? Not exactly subtle. With a thought, he accessed his system interface and focused on the weapon. The blade shimmered, dissolving into particles of light before vanishing entirely. Weapon stored in system inventory. Arthur flexed his empty hands, feeling the weight of the weapon disappear. Handy, I need to fight more, but one causality for the day is enough. I can't make myself the target of justice this early on. Arthur paused in the middle of the street, pulling his attention inward. His fingers flicked through the system interface as his mind began to process the changes. A steady hum of energy surrounded him, the quiet rhythm of his growth settling in as he focused on the stats screen. Name: Arthur Blackwynd. Job: None. Title: Bane of the Unworthy. Level: 4. Fatigue: 0. HP: 350. MP: 250. Strength: 23 to 30. Health: 12 to 15. Agility: 11 to 13. Intelligence: 11 to 13. Sense: 11 to 13. Available ability points: 6 to 0. Passive skill: Tenacity level 1. Skills: Bloodlust level 1. Arthur's lips twitched upward as he glanced at the stats, nodding in approval. Strength for now. I've got to make sure I can at least do my daily quest without dying, he muttered to himself, and the rest can wait. Once I unlock my shadow powers, I'll focus on mana and the other specifics. But for now, he allocated the 6 available ability points into strength. As he confirmed the changes, he could feel a surge of power running through his muscles. The weight on his body felt lighter, like he'd just shed an invisible burden. Much better, Arthur thought, a sense of satisfaction filling him as he looked at his newly enhanced stats. This should make those damn sit-ups and running a little less torturous. He took a moment to mentally catalog the changes before closing the interface, his focus shifting back to the world around him. The streets bustled with activity, but Arthur felt different now, stronger, more capable. Up in the sky, amidst the sprawling city of Jump, 2 figures floated silently, watching Arthur below. Their presence was barely noticeable to anyone on the ground, but their keen eyes tracked his every move. The air around them hummed with an otherworldly energy. Raven, dressed in her signature dark cloak, her hood raised to obscure her face except for her piercing violet eyes, stood with a calm but calculating demeanor. Beside her, Starfire floated effortlessly, her long, fiery hair flowing in the wind, the vibrant green of her outfit glowing under the setting sun. The contrast between their appearances was striking. Raven with her brooding, mystical aura, and Starfire with her radiant, almost ethereal presence. Starfire, her gaze fixed on Arthur, tilted her head slightly. "He looks strong," she said, her voice laced with both admiration and concern. "But what he did earlier, it was wrong. Those thugs didn't deserve death." Raven's eyes narrowed as she studied Arthur's form below. There was a subtle tension in the air around her, a quiet intensity that made it clear she wasn't simply observing. "I don't know," she replied, her voice calm yet carrying a weight of something deeper. "What he did wasn't justified, but I sensed something more beneath the surface." Starfire turned to her, her golden eyes reflecting concern. "What do you mean?" Raven's lips twisted into a slight frown as she closed her eyes for a moment, sensing the lingering energy around Arthur. He's hiding a greater source of power. What he did back there, those thugs were nothing to him. That was just a glimpse. He's far stronger than what he's showing. Whatever he's capable of, it's much more than that. Her eyes snapped open, her voice firm. "I don't trust him yet. There's something dangerous about him, but it's still too early to make a decision." Starfire watched Arthur intently, her gaze softening with a touch of empathy. "So, should we capture him? Bring him in for questioning?" Raven shook her head, the edge of her cloak fluttering in the wind. "No, not yet." Her voice was firm, yet tinged with a sense of resolve. "I'll observe him more. If he proves to be a threat, or if he's worth the risk, I'll bring him to Robin. But for now, we wait." Starfire nodded, understanding the weight of the decision. "I trust your judgment, Raven." With one last glance at Arthur, the two women turned their attention away, vanishing into the shadows of the sky as they continued their silent watch. Arthur finished his final set of squats and sit-ups, his breath heavy but steady, a testament to the weeks of conditioning he had pushed through. Looking around at the sidelines, he could hear the whispers. "He's been at it for days, a whole week now, non-stop on the track," one person murmured in awe. Another voice chimed in. "I told you he was training to join the Olympics, man. Guy's built different." Arthur rolled his eyes, half amused, half exhausted by the constant attention. He wiped the sweat from his brow and straightened up, allowing his mind to drift for a moment. "I've been doing this for a week straight." He glanced at the others around him as he caught his breath, the usual hustle and bustle of the school grounds swirling in the background. But then, his thoughts lingered on something that had been bothering him for the past few days. "I haven't seen Raven in a week," he thought, a slight frown pulling at the corners of his mouth. The last encounter with her had been strange. She'd left him with more questions than answers, and ever since then, he hadn't caught a single glimpse of her around the school. He couldn't quite shake the feeling that something was off, like her watching him wasn't the end of it. Did she find something out? Is she still keeping an eye on me? Just as that thought crossed his mind, a soft ping rang through his mind. His system interface flashed before his eyes, a welcome sight that drew his attention away from his concerns. Daily quest completed. You leveled up. Rewards granted. Choose 1+5 ability points. Blessed loot box. Full recovery. Arthur blinked, looking at the options. He was hardly tired from his training anymore, the days of struggling with basic exercises long behind him. He'd grown stronger, faster, and his stamina had improved exponentially. "I'm not exactly exhausted," he thought to himself with a chuckle. "I guess it's about time I opened this loot box." With a flick of his wrist, the box materialized in his hands. He could feel the energy pulse through it as it began to crack open, revealing a gleaming set of armor. The metal was simple yet sturdy, glowing faintly with an almost ethereal light. The armor's design was functional, built for both protection and mobility. A dark, matte finish with simple yet striking engravings along the shoulders and chest gave it a battle-ready aura. Knight of Azarath armor set increases defense and health by +200. Arthur ran his fingers along the edges, impressed. "Interesting name, dear system," he mused. The armor would definitely serve its purpose, he thought, especially in a world where danger lurked around every corner. Guess I can expect some connection to this world in my items. He slipped the armor into his system inventory, satisfied for now. But there was more to come. A key glimmered within the loot box, and his eyes widened as he read the name of the dungeon it unlocked. Key to Dimensional Dungeon Tower of Fate can be used in the abandoned slums of Jump City. Arthur felt the weight of the key's significance. Tower of Fate? His heart quickened, a sense of urgency pressing down on him. This was it, the next step. He didn't know exactly what lay beyond, but his instincts told him it was something important, something that would push him further toward understanding his purpose here, and perhaps even reveal more about the world he had been reincarnated into. This better be the one I need right now. With a mental command, Arthur allocated his ability points, Feeling the surge of power as his stats grew stronger, he focused mainly on boosting his strength further. Even though his health and agility had seen improvement, he knew that the key to tackling what was ahead would lie in his raw power. Once done, he could feel the weight of the choices he made in his mind. No more wasting time. The Tower of Fate was calling to him, and he was ready to answer. "I can't waste any more time," Arthur muttered, determination flooding his veins. "I need to unlock that power now." Arthur moved swiftly through his room, packing essential items into a small, weathered bag. A few days' worth of non-perishable food, a water bottle, and a couple of sturdy, worn-out tools. The reality of his upcoming journey to the Tower of Fate was beginning to settle in. He'd need supplies to survive the trials ahead, whatever they might be. The last few days had passed in a blur of training, leveling up, and confronting his purpose. Now it was time to take that next step. As he folded an extra set of clothes into the bag, the sound of footsteps caught his attention. His mother appeared in the doorway, her brow furrowed as she looked at him, eyes scanning his preparations. "Arthur? Where are you going, packing like that?" she asked, her voice a mix of concern and curiosity. Arthur straightened up and turned to face her, offering a casual smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Just a trip I planned, Mom. Nothing major." His mother looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. There was a slight hesitation in her eyes before she let out a quiet sigh. "A trip, huh? Well, be careful, okay?" She gave him a soft smile, though something about it seemed distant, as if she didn't quite understand the changes in her son. "You've changed a lot lately." Arthur didn't comment on that. He had changed, and he knew it. In a world like this, it was either adapt or get left behind. But he didn't want to dwell on the past. His mind was too focused on what lay ahead. As he zipped up the bag, ready to leave, he glanced at his mother again, his curiosity getting the better of him. "Hey, Mom, about my brother. You said he's busy, right?" His mother's expression shifted, a shadow crossing her face. "Oh, you know already," she sighed, looking down for a moment, as if weighing how much to say. "Your brother rarely comes back home these days. He's always tied up with running the company. You know how it is." She paused before adding, "He's just busy with his responsibilities." Arthur didn't press further. Something about his brother's absence never quite sat right with him, but now wasn't the time to dig deeper into family matters. He nodded and muttered, "All right." Inwardly, however, a small, nagging thought lingered. Why do I feel like something strange is going on with my family? His brother's absence felt like more than just work, and his mother's distant tone raised more questions than answers. But the time for those thoughts would come later. Right now there was a greater, more pressing matter to deal with. "All right, I'll be leaving now," Arthur said, his voice steady even though his mind was swirling with uncertainty. His mother nodded, offering a soft but reassuring smile. "Take care of yourself, Arthur, and remember, be safe." As he stepped onto the streets, he couldn't shake the feeling that the world around him was about to shift again. The abandoned slums of Jump City, Arthur thought to himself as he made his way toward the outskirts of the city. It was there that he'd begin his journey. His mind raced, full of thoughts and questions about what awaited him. The air was thick with a heavy, stagnant energy, the kind that only places left forgotten by time could hold. And yet, he didn't hesitate. This was the place where his journey would truly begin. The faint hum of the key in his pocket grew louder with every step. Arthur's fingers brushed the cool metal, and a strange sensation washed over him. The air felt charged, like static before a storm. His heart picked up pace, a familiar excitement bubbling in his chest. This was it. He could feel it, the unmistakable pull of destiny. As Arthur reached the heart of the abandoned slums, the silence around him was deafening. The decaying ruins of the forgotten district loomed on all sides, their jagged edges silhouetted against the faint glow of distant city lights. The faint hum of the key in his pocket grew louder, resonating deep in his chest. His steps slowed, his eyes scanning the empty space around him. "This must be it," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Taking the key out of his pocket, he stared at it for a moment. It felt warm to the touch, pulsing softly like it was alive. But there was no gate, no door, nothing to unlock, just empty air. He frowned. "I guess I'm supposed to just..." Almost instinctively, he raised the key and waved it in front of him. As it moved through the air, a sudden resistance stopped it in its tracks. Arthur froze. There was nothing there. No visible surface, no doorway, yet the key felt like it had slotted into an invisible lock suspended in midair. "Well, I expected something different," Arthur said, blinking in surprise. Taking a deep breath, he twisted the key. The moment he did, a sharp click echoed through the space, followed by a low rumble that seemed to shake the very air around him. Light flared from the tip of the key, spreading outward in rippling waves. The air in front of him shimmered and warped, folding in on itself until an ethereal portal emerged. The swirling vortex pulsed with vibrant colors, electric blues, fiery oranges, and deep purples, all twisting and turning in an endless dance. Arthur could feel the sheer energy radiating from it, a tangible force that made the hair on his arms stand on end. He took a step back, momentarily overwhelmed by the sight. The portal thrummed like a heartbeat, steady and powerful, as though beckoning him forward. Arthur smirked, gripping the key tightly. "Guess this is it. No turning back now." With a single step, he moved forward, the portal's light engulfing him. As he passed through, he felt a rush of energy flood his senses, a strange mix of exhilaration and disorientation. The world shifted around him, the slums disappearing in an instant. When he emerged on the other side, he found himself standing in a vast, otherworldly chamber. The air was dense, almost oppressive, and the ground beneath his feet was smooth and cold, like polished obsidian. Towering columns stretched high into a dark, endless void above, glowing faintly with intricate runes that pulsed with an ancient energy. Arthur exhaled slowly, his breath visible in the chilly air. The sheer scale of the place was overwhelming, and yet he felt an undeniable pull, like he was meant to be here. "Time to find out what my real purpose is in this place," he said to himself, his voice echoing softly in the vast emptiness. As Arthur took his first cautious steps into the vast chamber, a sudden shift rippled through the air. The towering obsidian columns and ancient runes dissolved like smoke, revealing a twisted mirage of the city he'd just left. The slums were back, or so it seemed. Crumbling buildings stretched around him, but their edges were jagged and unnatural, the shadows they cast far darker than they should have been. The faint flicker of streetlights sputtered in the eerie stillness, casting long, distorted silhouettes that danced like specters. A deafening silence blanketed the area, thicker than any fog. It wasn't the kind of silence that brought peace. It was oppressive, unnatural, as if the world itself were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Arthur's instincts screamed at him, and he wasted no time. With a swift motion, he summoned the greatsword of the Reborn, its blade gleaming faintly, as if it, too, felt the tension. The weight of it in his hands was reassuring, a reminder that he wasn't defenseless, no matter how hostile this place felt. Then it came, a low, guttural hum that resonated all around him. His system interface blinked into view, accompanied by a cold, monotone voice that seemed to echo from the very fabric of the air. "System notification. Welcome to the Tower of Fate. Only the worthy shall conquer this place. 100 floors of torment, peril, and judgment await you. Progress is marked by blood, and retreat is not an option. To escape, you must slay the guardian at the end of every 10th floor. Fail, and you will join the countless souls who have perished here, their dreams and ambitions forever lost. Your performance will determine your job and its rank." Arthur's grip on the sword tightened as the voice continued, its tone dripping with menace. "Here, strength is tested. Here, resolve is shattered. Enter as a warrior, leave as a legend, or not at all." The notification vanished as abruptly as it had appeared, leaving Arthur alone in the haunting stillness once more. His pulse quickened, though he forced himself to exhale, calming the storm of thoughts swirling in his mind. "Well, isn't this dramatic?" he muttered, glancing at the sword in his hands. His voice carried a dry sarcasm, but his eyes burned with a fierce determination. Arthur raised his head, his gaze sweeping over the unnatural cityscape. His senses were on high alert, every shadow and faint rustle feeling like a potential threat. But instead of fear, an odd sense of exhilaration coursed through him. "Very well," he said aloud, his voice steady and resolute. "I was planning to go wild here anyway." Arthur took cautious steps forward, his greatsword resting heavily on his shoulder. The eerie silence of the distorted city weighed on him like a physical force. His eyes scanned the surroundings, sharp and unyielding, but there was nothing to hint at immediate danger, just the unsettling stillness and flickering lights. Then in the distance, he saw them. At first, they appeared normal. Ordinary people walking aimlessly along the fractured streets, their postures loose, their movements almost casual. Arthur frowned, tilting his head as he observed them. Something didn't sit right. He stopped in his tracks as they all, at once, froze. Every single head turned toward him, their movements unnaturally synchronized. Their lifeless, hollow eyes locked onto him, and the air seemed to grow colder. Arthur blinked, gripping the hilt of his greatsword tighter. "Wow, that's creepy," he muttered under his breath. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The only sound was the faint hum of energy in the distorted atmosphere. Then, as if some invisible command had been given, they all broke into a sprint, rushing toward him with feral intensity. The distance between them evaporated in seconds, and Arthur's sharp eyes caught the weapons they carried. Rusty knives, broken pipes, shattered bottles, and even jagged planks of wood. All crude improvised tools that screamed desperation and violence. The strangest part? Their faces. Twisted into grotesque, exaggerated expressions of rage and hunger, they looked less like humans and more like hollow vessels, puppets driven by something primal and sinister. Arthur adjusted his grip on his greatsword, lowering it in preparation. "Really creepy," he said with a grimace, his voice dry despite the tension mounting in his chest. The first wave was nearly upon him. Their footsteps were erratic, their wild shrieks growing louder. Arthur steeled himself, planting his feet firmly on the cracked asphalt. The blade of his greatsword caught the faint light, casting a sharp glint that seemed to warn the oncoming horde. Arthur's first swing with the greatsword of the lowborn was both calculated and brutal. The blade arced through the air with deadly grace, slicing cleanly through the first charging enemy, as though they were nothing more than paper. The figure dropped without a sound, and Arthur's feet shifted seamlessly into his next stance, his movements almost instinctual. The next opponent came at him with a rusted pipe, its jagged edges aimed for his head. Arthur tilted his body slightly, the attack narrowly missing him. His free hand shot out, grabbing the attacker by the wrist, twisting it with such force that a sickening crack echoed through the air. Without hesitation, he drove the pommel of his greatsword into their chest, sending them sprawling backward. "This feels familiar," Arthur muttered to himself, his voice low amidst the chaos. He sidestepped another assailant, spinning with the momentum and using the flat of his blade to knock them clean off their feet. The sound of footsteps, dozens of them, pounded toward him, but he remained unnervingly calm. The blade became an extension of his body, every swing, every thrust, guided by an almost otherworldly expertise. The enemies fell like wheat before a scythe, each strike precise and devastating. Arthur ducked under a wild swing from a makeshift club, retaliating with a swift kick that sent his opponent crashing into two others. As the horde thinned, Arthur switched it up. When another enemy lunged at him with a broken shard of glass, he met them head-on with his bare hands. His fist collided with their face, the impact loud and bone-crunching. Another approached from his side, but Arthur pivoted smoothly, elbowing them in the throat before spinning and slamming the greatsword down onto a third. "This feels like home," Arthur said under his breath, the revelation startling even him. His body moved like it had been trained for decades, like he'd been forged for this very moment. The horde didn't stop. By the time he reached the outskirts of level 2, the enemies began to change. No longer resembling humans, they were deformed, their bodies twisted and unnaturally bulky. One such figure, with grotesque muscles bulging unevenly across its arms and shoulders, roared as it charged him. Arthur held his ground, narrowing his eyes as the creature swung a massive arm down at him. He sidestepped at the last second, the ground cracking where the blow landed. Arthur's greatsword slashed upward in a smooth motion, carving deep into the creature's exposed torso. Blackened blood sprayed from the wound, but the thing didn't fall immediately. "So you're tougher," Arthur said with a smirk. "Good. I was starting to get bored." The creature roared again, swinging its other arm wildly. Arthur leapt backward, avoiding the attack before closing the distance with a swift lunge. With a powerful two-handed grip, he drove the blade through the creature's chest, twisting it with brutal efficiency before yanking it free. The monster toppled over, lifeless. By the time he reached level 5, Arthur was drenched in sweat but wore a grin. The enemies were no longer recognizable as human, hulking beasts with jagged claws, glowing eyes, and distorted forms. One lunged at him, faster than the rest, its claw aimed directly for his throat. Arthur ducked low, the claw grazing his hair. With a quick step forward, he slammed the hilt of his sword into the creature's jaw, stunning it. He followed up with a powerful upward slash that severed its arm clean off. Another monster, larger than the last, swung a massive club down toward him. Arthur rolled to the side, the club shattering the ground where he'd just been standing. Without hesitation, he sprang to his feet, driving the tip of his blade into the beast's side and slicing horizontally, tearing through its thick flesh. "Stronger," Arthur noted aloud, his breath heavy but his grin unwavering, but still not enough. The battle continued, each wave more monstrous and powerful than the last, but Arthur moved with unrelenting precision. He was a whirlwind of destruction, his great sword cleaving through the enemies with grace and brutality. Even when surrounded, he never faltered, using his fists, elbows, and even his feet to subdue attackers when the blade wasn't enough. As the last of the level 5 enemies crumbled to the ground, Arthur planted the blade of his sword into the fractured ground, leaning on it slightly as he caught his breath. His heart pounded and his body ached, but there was no mistaking the fire in his eyes. He looked around the silent battlefield, the eerie quiet settling in once more. "All right," he said, pulling the great sword free and resting it on his shoulder. "Show me what else you've got, Tower of Fate." The dim, flickering light of the Tower of Fate cast haunting shadows over the blood-streaked walls, remnants of the chaos Arthur had unleashed. The air was thick, with the stench of burnt flesh, metallic blood, and something otherworldly, an unnatural scent that clung to his senses. His footsteps echoed in the cavernous space as he approached the staircase leading to level 10, each step slow but unyielding, a symphony of determination and exhaustion. Arthur's once pristine attire was torn and soaked with blood, some his, most not. His chest heaved with each breath, and his arms, corded with tense, straining muscles, bore the weight of his colossal greatsword. The blade rested across his shoulder, its edge dripping with a dark ichor that hissed softly as it evaporated into the air. The intricate etchings on the weapon glowed faintly, as if alive, resonating with the blood it had tasted. His face, smeared with dirt and crimson streaks. A shallow cut ran across his cheek, and a thin line of blood trailed down to his jaw. His ashen-white hair clung to his forehead, damp with sweat and grime, but his piercing eyes burned with an intensity. Arthur's gait was slow but deliberate, each step a testament to the sheer force of will that had carried him this far. His body screamed for respite, his legs felt like lead, his shoulders ached with the weight of countless swings. "This place is relentless," he muttered under his breath, his voice gravelly from exertion. His gaze shifted to the looming staircase ahead, the final barrier to the dreaded level 10. "But so am I." Arthur glanced at his hands, calloused and raw from gripping the greatsword through countless battles. He flexed his fingers, feeling the weight of the blade like a natural extension of himself. The tower had underestimated him. Every slash, every swing, every battle, it had all awakened something deeper within him. He wasn't just surviving this trial, he was thriving in it. As Arthur stepped into level 10, he was startled to find himself in a familiar alleyway. The dim light, cracked walls, and distant street lamp mirrored a memory from days ago. Ahead, 2 thugs harassed a screaming woman, her voice trembling with fear. "Is this replaying the past?" Arthur muttered, gripping his greatsword tightly. Without hesitation, he advanced, his blade cutting down the thugs in swift, precise strikes. Their weapons clattered uselessly as they fell, leaving only the woman crouched against the wall. Arthur extended his hand to her. "You're safe now," he said, his tone calm but wary. The woman's trembling stopped, replaced by an unsettling grin. Suddenly, she burst into a maniacal laugh, her voice echoing unnaturally. Arthur froze, his outstretched hand lowering as a chill ran through him. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded, stepping back. Arthur watched in shock as the woman's figure twisted grotesquely, her limbs contorted unnaturally, her skin turning pale and almost sickly white. Her hair shifted into 2 colors, one side a bright, obnoxious pink, the other a deep, electric blue. A wide, deranged grin stretched across her face, smudged lipstick forming a ghastly smile. Arthur squinted, disbelief etched on his face. "Harley Quinn?" he muttered. Harley twirled a massive, oversized mallet out of nowhere, giggling maniacally. Ding ding ding! Give the boy a prize! But Sugar, you're in my playground now. She pressed a button on her mallet, and suddenly, explosive confetti burst from the head, filling the room with blinding flashes and choking dust. Arthur coughed, waving the colorful smoke away with his free hand. Really? Confetti bombs? That's your big play? Harley wagged a finger at him, grinning wildly. Oh, honey, I'm just getting started. She flipped backward onto a nearby ledge, releasing more smoke bombs into the air. Arthur growled, gripping his greatsword tightly. Annoying! He charged toward her, but as he closed the gap, a shadowy figure leapt in his path. Without thinking, Arthur swung his sword, slicing the figure clean in half. To his frustration, it wasn't Harley. It was a faceless, mob-like enemy that crumbled into dust. Oopsie! Wrong one! Harley taunted from above, swinging her legs playfully from the ledge. Arthur scowled and advanced again, only for more shadowy figures to lunge at him from all directions. Each time he tried to close in on Harley, he was forced to cut down the mobs blocking his way. His blade struck true every time, but each swing only led to more faceless enemies spawning between him and his target. Harley cackled, tossing random objects, rubber chickens, smoke grenades, even a pie at him, all of which either missed or served to irritate him further. You're like a puppy chasing its tail. So cute! Arthur gritted his teeth, spinning mid-swing to decimate another wave of mobs. You're starting to piss me off, clown. Oh, poor baby, Harley cooed mockingly. Why don't you take a breather? Oh, wait, you can't. She pressed another button on her mallet, and the ground beneath Arthur crackled with electric sparks. Arthur jumped back just in time, his boots skidding across the floor. You're all tricks and no bite, he growled. His patience wearing thin, he activated Bloodlust, his eyes gleaming with crimson fury. The next time a mob lunged at him, Arthur moved faster than before, cutting it down in one clean motion and closing the distance between him and Harley. She tried to backflip away, but this time, Arthur anticipated her movement, leaping high and slamming his greatsword down onto her mallet. The impact shattered it, sending her tumbling to the ground. All right, Quinn, Arthur said, looming over her as she struggled to get up. Enough of the games. Harley looked up at him, a flicker of panic crossing her face before she forced another grin. Guess the fun's over, huh? She raised her hands in mock surrender. Arthur didn't hesitate. Enough games, he muttered, swinging his great sword in a clean arc. The blade cut through her effortlessly, and Harley's body fell limp to the ground. He exhaled sharply, gripping his sword as he stared at her lifeless form. This is just a simulation, he reminded himself. It shouldn't matter. Wiping the sweat from his brow, he turned and began walking toward the exit. Guess that's it for level 10. I think I can move further. Boom! The deafening sound of an explosion cut him off mid-sentence, the shockwave knocking him off his feet. Arthur coughed, disoriented, as dust and debris filled the air. He looked back to where Harley's body had been, only to find a smoking crater in its place. A slow, menacing clap echoed through the air. Arthur squinted, and out of the smoke stepped a figure he immediately recognized. A tall man in a purple suit, green hair slicked back, and a face painted with a horrifyingly cheerful grin. The Joker. Arthur's eyes narrowed, his grip tightening on his sword. You've got to be kidding me. The Joker threw his head back and let out a spine-chilling laugh. Oh, I never kid. Well, maybe sometimes. But this is no joke, my boy. He spread his arms wide, his voice dripping with mockery. You thought my Harley girl was the final act? Oh, no. She's just the warm-up act to the real punchline. Me? Arthur stood up, his body tense and his mind racing. The Joker on level 10? I thought Harley was the boss here, he muttered, feeling the weight of his situation. The Joker tilted his head, his smile widening unnaturally. Oh, don't look so surprised. You're in my funhouse now, kiddo. And the rules? Well, let's just say they're mine to bend or break. He pulled out a deck of razor-sharp playing cards, casually tossing one into the air and catching it between his fingers. Arthur's expression hardened. You think I'm afraid of you? Afraid? The Joker cackled, tapping his temple with a finger. Nah, you don't seem the type. But that's okay. Fear's not the only spice in my kitchen. How about chaos? With a snap of his fingers, shadowy mobs began emerging from the smoke, their forms grotesque and twisted, wielding knives, bats, and even chains. Arthur rolled his shoulders, raising his sword. Fine. Chaos it is. Let's see how you handle it when I cut through your little circus. The Joker grinned devilishly, pulling a small detonator from his pocket and waving it tauntingly. Oh, you're going to level comes next, kiddo. Let's make this a real showstopper. The Joker's shadowy mob surged forward like a tide of chaos, their grotesque forms wielding an arsenal of crude weapons. Arthur swung his greatsword with precision, cutting down the first wave effortlessly. His movements were sharp, calculated, born of the system's enhancements, but also something deeper, something instinctive. Through it all, the Joker stood back, grinning like a puppet master, pulling the strings. He spun the detonator in his hand, his laughter echoing in the eerie silence between Arthur's strikes. You're good, kid. Real good. But you're playing checkers, and I'm over here with 4D chess. Let's up the ante. He slammed his hand on the detonator. Boom! Explosions erupted around Arthur, forcing him to leap back to avoid the collapsing debris. The mobs didn't let up, closing in even as Arthur's blade carved through them. Yet, no matter how many he killed, the Joker's twisted grin remained plastered on his face. Arthur gritted his teeth, his bloodlust ability flaring to life. A crimson aura surrounded him, and the remaining mobs faltered, trembling in fear. But not the Joker. He simply laughed harder, his eyes glinting with something that unnerved Arthur. Oh, that's cute. A little blood-soaked aura? You think that'll scare me? He mocked, spreading his arms wide. Kid, I've been staring into the abyss since before you were born, and guess what? The abyss stared back and laughed. Arthur hesitated for a split second, unnerved by the Joker's lack of fear. Even with bloodlust active, the man seemed to revel in the chaos, as if he thrived on it. What the hell are you? Arthur muttered under his breath. The Joker wagged a finger at him. Oh, no, no, no! You're asking the wrong question, my boy. It's not, what am I? It's why. And the answer is simple. I exist to show the world that it's all one big joke, and you, my sword-swinging friend, are the punchline. Arthur clenched his jaw, shaking off the doubt creeping into his mind. He had to focus. The mobs were endless, and the Joker was playing him, forcing him to react rather than act. Then it hit him the detonator. That was the key. As another wave of mobs charged at him, Arthur feigned exhaustion, letting his movements slow. The Joker tilted his head, curious but amused. Getting tired, are we? Don't worry, I'll keep the laughs coming. Arthur smirked inwardly. He waited until the mobs were within striking distance, then suddenly lunged forward with a burst of speed, cutting through the group in one swift motion. His real target wasn't them, it was the Joker. The clown's grin faltered as Arthur closed the gap, his greatsword poised to strike. But just as the blade swung down, the Joker sidestepped, tossing a smoke bomb at Arthur's feet. Not bad, kid, but you'll have to try harder then. Arthur anticipated the move. Through the smoke, he tossed his greatsword like a spear, aiming not for the Joker, but for the detonator in his hand. The blade struck true, shattering the device. The Joker's laughter faltered for the first time, replaced by a look of mock disappointment. Well, that's no fun, he muttered. Arthur wasted no time, closing the distance and slamming his fist into the Joker's chest. The impact sent him crashing into a pile of debris. The clown groaned, but even as he lay there, bloodied and beaten, his grin remained. Arthur picked up his greatsword, pointing it at the Joker's throat. This ends now. Batman should have done this a long time ago, he said, his voice cold. The Joker chuckled, coughing up blood. Oh, kid, you don't get it, do you? You've already lost. You think killing me means you've won? Nah, I live in here now. He tapped his temple with a bloody finger, and when you look in the mirror, you'll hear me laughing. Every single time. Arthur didn't respond. He drove the blade through the Joker's chest, silencing him. The clown gasped, his smile never fading. With his last breath, he whispered, You're fun, kid. Real fun. Don't let the world ruin that for you. The Joker died with a grin, his lifeless eyes staring back at Arthur. Arthur pulled his sword free, his hands trembling slightly. That wasn't even real, he muttered, trying to convince himself. But the unease lingered. His bloodlust had failed to frighten the Joker, and the clown's fearlessness left an unsettling impression. He wiped the blood from his face, turning toward the exit to level 11. If that was just the start, he said to himself, his voice low, what the hell is waiting for me at the top? Arthur stood still in the aftermath, the Joker's body laying lifeless before him. A silence hung in the air, a stark contrast to the chaos that had ensued moments before. Then, a series of system notifications flooded his vision, the words appearing before him like a parade of achievements. You leveled up. You leveled up. You leveled up. You defeated the boss of this level. You can now exit the tower. Arthur's eyes narrowed as he saw his level soar, a staggering 30 levels gained in such a short span. His body was battered, every muscle aching, his breathing ragged, but the numbers on the screen made it clear. He was growing stronger. I could keep going, Arthur muttered to himself, his gaze lingering on the path ahead, but every fiber of his being screamed for rest. But every bone in my body is telling me to stop. His body screamed in protest, bruised and bloodied, and yet his hunger for strength tugged him forward. But after a brief pause, he sighed, defeated by the undeniable exhaustion that weighed him down. I should leave. Come back later, he whispered, almost as though he was bargaining with himself. The realization that he didn't know how much time had passed gnawed at him. Was it days? Hours? Either way, the decision was clear. He chose to leave, stepping into the threshold, where the portal awaited, the glow shimmering before him as it beckoned him out of the tower. As he crossed the threshold, and the world around him shifted once more, Arthur found himself standing outside, back in the familiar ruins of the slums. But this time, he felt different. Stronger, more attuned to the power coursing through him. The system assessed his performance, as it always did, and then a final notification appeared. Remarkable mastery. Death follows wherever you set foot. You have gained the title of Soul Warden. Shadow extraction unlocked. You can now call upon up to 20 shadow soldiers. Arthur let out a breath, eyes glowing as he took in the magnitude of the power he'd just unlocked. Soul Warden. The title suited him somehow, resonating with a dark, ominous power that seemed to settle in his very core. His fingers flexed instinctively, and a smile tugged at his lips. His eyes, glowing a fierce blue, looked out toward the horizon. Choose a command word to extract and summon shadows. Arthur read the message, and a dark grin spread across his face. He had been given the power, the means to control and bend shadows to his will. The possibilities flooded his mind, but one thought stood above the rest. The first command, the one that would bind the shadows to him, would set the tone for everything to come. His eyes glowed as he pondered the right word. His voice was a whisper, but the weight of his decision made the air around him feel charged. It can only be one word, Arthur said to himself. Arise, he said, his voice cutting through the stillness. Arthur's mind raced as the notification dissolved, leaving only the weight of his newfound ability. Now, time to grow my army, he thought to himself, his voice barely a whisper. Raven stood in the center of the Titan's common room, her arms folded across her chest, a tense air about her. She stared down at the ground, brow furrowed as if she were lost in thought, but the weight of her words still hung heavily in the room. I've been keeping an eye on him, she began, her voice low, almost guarded. But he's disappeared. I can't find a trace of him anywhere, not even with my spells. The Titans gathered around her, exchanged glances. Robin, always the strategist, raised an eyebrow and leaned forward, clearly intrigued. Really? He asked, his tone sharp. Not even your magic could track him down? Raven's expression darkened slightly, the familiar flicker of frustration tugging at her control. No, she snapped, her eyes briefly glowing as the anger within her flared up. I tried everything, Robin. It's like he vanished into thin air. Robin sat back, considering this. His usually composed demeanor shifted into one of quiet concern. Damn, he muttered under his breath. All right, Raven. I'll let you handle it then. Starfire, standing nearby, raised an eyebrow at Raven's reaction. A mischievous smirk tugged at her lips. Oh, Raven, she teased playfully, such fire in your words. It makes you much more intriguing. Raven shot Starfire a sharp look, but she simply giggled, clearly entertained by the tension. I'm just saying, Raven, Robin continued. This guy's starting to interest me. If we can't track him down, that makes him more dangerous. Be careful. His tone softened, a rare hint of caution in his voice. Raven took a deep breath, pushing down her irritation. I know. But I'll find him. No one slips past me for long. Arthur sat back on the couch, a comfortable silence surrounding him as he relaxed in his dimly lit living room. The glow of his system interface was the only light as he stared at his stats, allocating his hard-earned ability points with ease. Damn, he muttered, a smirk tugging at his lips. I feel more powerful than ever. His fingers flicked through the menus effortlessly, adding points to his strength and intelligence, feeling the surge of power course through him with every allocation. I've been pushing myself, but it feels like I could take on anything now. Name, Arthur Blackwynd. Job, Soul Warden. Title, Bane of the Unworthy, plus 20% attack against those who harbor evil intent. Level, 40. Fatigue 0. HP, 3,800. MP, 4,700. Strength, 45 to 100. Health, 27 to 84. Agility, 20 to 50. Intelligence, 22 to 100. Sense, 20 to 50. Available ability points, 90 to 0. Passive skill, Tenacity level 1. Job-specific skill, Shadow Extraction. Skills, Bloodlust level 1. He leaned back, stretching as the weight of his recent battles still clung to his body. His muscles were sore, but it was a satisfying kind of pain, the kind that comes from pushing beyond limits. The tower, the battles, they all seemed like nothing now. Arthur's gaze drifted to the window, the view of Jump City sprawled out before him. A sudden, thought-provoking chill ran down his spine. He couldn't shake the feeling that the tower still had more to offer, more to throw at him. I should head back to that tower, finish what I started. But his voice trailed off, the thought of the Joker still gnawing at his mind. A grimace twisted his face as he recalled the madman's chaotic presence, the twisted games he had played, and the danger he posed. Seriously, Joker? Arthur let out a low laugh, shaking his head. What the hell's in level 50, Darkseid? Do I get to fight gods next? His tone dripped with sarcasm, but the unease underneath his words was unmistakable. He knew better than to underestimate whatever lay ahead. Even though his power had grown exponentially, there were forces in this world or in the tower that could rival or even surpass his own. He just had to be ready for them. I'll deal with whatever comes next. Bring it on, he muttered, before standing up, his body flexing with newfound strength. His hand instinctively went to his sword, the great sword of the lowborn, hanging on the wall nearby. Arthur sat in his living room, idly flipping through his phone. The peaceful silence was welcome after the chaos of the tower. The weight of his thoughts pressed down on him, but it was a comfort compared to the battles he'd been facing. He wasn't sure what to expect next, but it was a welcome reprieve. Suddenly, a chill in the air made his senses snap to attention. Something was off. Something he couldn't quite put his finger on, but the atmosphere shifted. He felt a presence behind him, darker and familiar. He didn't even turn around. He didn't need to. His voice was steady, even though his mind raced. So, it's you, huh? From behind him, a soft voice rang out, cool and collected. It's been a while. Guess you're finally home. Arthur turned to see her, Raven, standing at the threshold of his living room, her dark cloak swaying as she slowly lifted her hood. Her violet eyes locked onto his with an intensity that immediately reminded him why he had been avoiding her in the first place. He raised an eyebrow, a slight smirk tugging at his lips. You've been stalking me, haven't you? He asked, crossing his arms. Raven didn't seem bothered by his accusation. Instead, she let out a quiet, almost amused sigh. I did, and I sensed that the power inside you, it's even stronger now. Arthur's smirk faded as he sighed, rubbing his temples. I know, Raven. I've been training, I get it. But Raven wasn't finished. Her voice, quieter now, held an undercurrent of curiosity. You killed a thug not long ago, didn't you? Arthur's eyes narrowed. The mention of the event stirred something inside of him, something dangerous, something that kept him from fully embracing the mantle of a hero. I did. But that's not the point, Raven. I don't want to be a part of your crusade. I don't want to be the good guy. My sense of justice is... Not ideal. He looked at her with a mixture of frustration and resolve, hoping she'd understand. Before he could finish, Raven stepped forward, her expression unreadable, though something about her tone softened. "I don't care about that," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. "It took me years to learn how to control my abilities and emotions, years of solitude, pain, and struggle." She paused, then added, "But I've learned, and I know what you're capable of. You could help people, more than just your own personal goals." Arthur was still unconvinced. He started walking toward his greatsword, resting against the wall near the window. As his hand hovered over the hilt, he looked back at her, turning his body halfway. "Why are you here exactly? I'm sure you're not here to debate morals with me." Raven hesitated for a moment, then her lips curved into a rare, small smile, more genuine than any smile Arthur had seen from her before. "That's true. I still want you to join us. I know where you could put your abilities to good use." She paused again, as if weighing her words carefully. "And for that, I've called in a helper, someone I'm sure you'll appreciate." Arthur raised an eyebrow at the unexpected statement. "A helper? What are you talking about?" Before Raven could elaborate, a sharp, almost arrogant voice broke in, cutting through the air between them like a blade. "Well, well, well, if it isn't the mysterious brooding hero in the making." The voice was unmistakable, sarcastic, and laced with a certain rough charm. Arthur turned to find a man standing right behind him, his hand resting heavily on Arthur's shoulder. The man had an air of chaos about him, a presence that demanded attention even in the face of Arthur's growing irritation. Arthur's brow furrowed. "Who the hell?" The man grinned, his tousled hair framing his face, a cigarette dangling from his lips. His smile was wild, mischievous, almost too confident. "Constantine. John Constantine, at your service." He gave Arthur a once-over, then a knowing wink. "We're going on a trip." Before Arthur could protest, Constantine placed a hand on his shoulder, the grip surprisingly strong, and without warning, the world around Arthur warped and twisted. The air crackled, and the next thing Arthur knew, his feet were no longer touching the ground. "Wait, what are you?" Arthur's voice was drowned out by the sudden onslaught of dizzying motion. "Relax," Constantine said with a smirk. "I'm taking you to a nice place. Nothing too crazy." "Well, nothing too crazy for you, mate." Arthur's vision swirled, and he tried to pull away, but the magic surrounding him was too strong. He had no choice but to let it happen. The man didn't even give him a chance to voice his rejection before the two of them disappeared, leaving Raven standing quietly behind them, her gaze unreadable. Arthur didn't know where he was going, but from the look in Constantine's eyes, he knew it wouldn't be good. As they disappeared into the ether, Raven's quiet voice followed them. "Don't worry, Arthur. This is just for you to find your—" Arthur stumbled forward, his boots scraping against the jagged, cracked ground beneath him. The air felt thick, almost suffocating, like it was pressing against his chest with every breath he took. A strange, pale fog blanketed everything, but it wasn't like any fog he'd seen. Before it shimmered, rippling as if alive, and carried faint whispers. Shadows stretched unnaturally, curling and twisting, even though there was no discernible light source to cast them. "What the hell?" Arthur muttered, his voice trailing off as he took in the eerie landscape. The sky, or what passed for a sky, was a churning mess of gray and black, with faint streaks of red bleeding through, like wounds in a living canvas. In the distance, there were towering, crumbling structures that seemed to defy logic, spiraling upward and sideways. The land itself was barren but alive, pulsing faintly beneath his feet, like a giant breathing entity. He spun around to face Constantine, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Where the hell are we?" Constantine, standing a few paces ahead, lit a cigarette with a casual flick of his lighter, seemingly unfazed by the nightmarish surroundings. He took a long drag, exhaling smoke that curled unnaturally in the air before dissipating into the mist. "Limbo," he said nonchalantly. "Or, if you're feeling poetic, purgatory. A cozy little realm sandwiched between the living and the dead." Arthur blinked, trying to process the words. "Purgatory. You brought me to purgatory." Constantine smirked, clearly enjoying Arthur's bewilderment. "Relax, mate. It's not like I dragged you into hell, though. I've got a punch card for that one, too." He waved his hand dismissively. "Limbo's where the souls linger, the ones who didn't quite make the cut for heaven or hell. It's complicated." Arthur stared at him, still trying to wrap his head around it. He opened his mouth to ask another question, but decided against it. Instead, after a moment of silence, he asked, "Aren't you part of the Justice League or something?" Constantine froze mid-drag, then burst out laughing, the sound sharp and dry like gravel. "Me? Part of the Justice League? Bloody hell no." He shook his head, his grin wide. "I don't exactly do the bidding of that bat. And between you and me, I'd rather stay away from him. The bloke's good at what he does, sure, but he's dull as a brick. Always brooding, always calculating. Not my kind of company." "Occasionally I do," Constantine corrected, wagging a finger. "We work together occasionally. I'm freelance, mate. They call me when things go belly up with demons or ghosts or whatever supernatural mess they can't handle. I don't go looking for hero gigs. It's bad for my image." Arthur sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "All right, fine. So what are we doing here then?" Constantine smirked again, tapping ash off his cigarette. "We? No, mate. You're here because I'm doing my apprentice a favor." Arthur raised an eyebrow. "So this was Raven's idea, and she's your apprentice?" "Bingo, mate. She called in a debt," Constantine said with a shrug, his tone casual, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Something that hinted it wasn't as simple as he made it sound. "And it cost me more than a pint to pull this off, so you'd better make it worth my while." Before Arthur could respond, something else caught his attention. In the distance, shadows began to move. No, not shadows, figures. Wandering, aimless figures, shuffling slowly across the barren landscape. Their shapes were distorted, their features blurred like half-forgotten memories. Some seemed to whisper incoherently, their voices merging with the ambient noise of the fog. Constantine glanced at the figures, then back at Arthur. "Ah, the locals, souls, lost, confused, and stuck here until something or someone sets them free." Arthur's grip tightened on the hilt of his greatsword. The whispers grew louder as more of the wandering souls appeared, their movements erratic, almost desperate. Then, as suddenly as they appeared, the whispers ceased, and Arthur realized Constantine was no longer beside him. "John?" Arthur called out, spinning around, his heart pounding. As Arthur stood in the eerie silence of limbo, the air suddenly grew colder, and a distant voice echoed through the void. It was barely a whisper at first, like a cold wind passing by, but it quickly gained strength, a haunting presence drawing closer. "You're a killer," the voice hissed. Arthur tensed, looking around, but there was nothing but shadows and empty space. A silhouette began to take shape, slowly manifesting into a figure before him. The figure was a man tattered clothes, skin pale as ash, eyes hollow and filled with rage. He looked more like a specter, but his presence was undeniable. "I was a man once," the ghost rasped, his voice ragged with anger. "A desperate man forced into choices I didn't want to make. But I did them. I killed, I stole, and now I'm here, wandering in this forsaken place." The ghost's hollow gaze fixed on Arthur, and he stepped closer, his footsteps silent, but heavy with judgment. "And you," the ghost pointed accusingly, his voice rising with fury. "You have blood on your hands too. I can see it. Every soul you snuff out weighs heavier on you than you realize. Don't you feel it?" Arthur stood still, his eyes hardening as the ghost continued, his words like daggers. "I didn't want to do it, but I had to. I did what I could to survive." The ghost's voice cracked with emotion. "But in the end, I paid the price, didn't I? And now, so will you." A sudden laugh rang through Arthur's mind, dark and gritty in a voice that only he could hear. Constantine's voice echoed inside his head. "You've got power, mate. Enough to play hero, enough to kill a man with a flick of your wrist. But every soul you snuff out has got weight, and their story doesn't just vanish when they're dead. Look at him. Look at the life you ended. Can you carry that?" Arthur's grip tightened on his great sword, and the ghost's words hit harder than he expected. "You have no idea about me or my power, John," Arthur thought to himself. The ghost snarled, his form flickering as if the energy of his anger was unstable. "You think you're above this? You think you're different from me? You have a curse, a power that will take you down the same path I walked. You'll end up just like me, damned and lost." Arthur's breath quickened, and he felt the weight of the ghost's words. This wasn't just some random spirit. It was a reflection of what could become of him if he wasn't careful. But before he could speak, Constantine's voice cut through again, more distant this time. "You've got a gift, kid. But gifts like that? They're bloody curses if you're not careful," Constantine warned, his words cold and matter-of-fact. "You think the world cares if you're meant to kill someone or not? Intentions don't mean squat when there's a body in the ground and a soul wandering down here." Arthur clenched his jaw, narrowing his eyes at the specter before him. Arthur's gaze remained steady as the ghost before him disintegrated, his form fading into the endless mist of limbo. The eerie quiet of the place hung heavy in the air, broken only by the faint whisper of souls passing by. But then, a sharp metallic sound echoed in his mind, a familiar ping that pulled his attention away from the dim landscape. System notification, quest activated. Hostile entities are actively seeking to harm you. Kill the 10 demons attempting to collect wandering souls. They are a threat to your existence in this realm. Arthur smirked to himself, never breaking stride as he walked further into the gloom of limbo. "Are they mistaking me for one of the souls they collect here?" he muttered under his breath. His smile widened as he looked ahead, his mind already calculating his next move. "This is fine by me," he said aloud, the words tasting like a challenge. "I was wondering who I should make my first shadow soldiers." His eyes gleamed with a growing excitement as the thought solidified. The demons hunting souls were the perfect candidates to start his army. "I'll kill them," Arthur muttered, his eyes now burning with determination. "Then I'll make them my eternal, loyal soldiers." The air in limbo shifted, thickening with an ominous presence as shadows slithered through the fog. From the shifting darkness, figures began to take shape, grotesque, writhing demons with gnarled claws, jagged teeth, and eyes burning with unholy hunger. Their twisted forms pulsed with an unnatural energy, their very presence an affront to the balance of life and death. Constantine exhaled, pulling his coat tighter as he observed from a distance. He muttered to himself, his voice laced with dry amusement. "Well, time's up. Should probably yank the lad out before this place gets its claws in him." He trailed off as his sharp eyes caught something. Arthur, standing tall amidst the encroaching horrors, his body relaxed, his breathing steady. But it was the smile that stopped Constantine in his tracks. Arthur wasn't afraid. If anything, he was excited. Constantine clicked his tongue. "I see. They mistook him for a stray soul. Poor bastards." He smirked, slipping his hands into his pockets. "This should be interesting to watch." The demons lunged. Arthur moved. The first one came at him, its elongated limbs stretching unnaturally, clawed hands swiping for his throat. Arthur ducked low, his body twisting like a seasoned predator, his fists slamming into the demon's chest with bone-crushing force. The sickening crack echoed through limbo as the creature was sent flying backward, crashing into a broken pillar with enough impact to shatter stone. Another roared and leaped toward him, its massive, jagged maw opening wide to consume him whole. Arthur shifted his weight, spinning mid-air, his foot colliding with the beast's skull like a battering ram. The force of the blow snapped its head back with a gruesome pop, its lifeless body crumbling to the ground. More came, snarling and shrieking, their twisted forms writhing as they attempted to encircle him. Their whispers slithered through the air, tendrils of dark magic latching onto his mind. "Give in. Let the darkness consume you. You are one of us. Surrender and become greater." Arthur's smile widened. "That's cute. I'm planning to do the same to you." The voices meant nothing to him. Their attempts to corrupt him were as futile as trying to drown a fish. He was already a storm, a force too relentless to be swayed. One demon lunged, its horned head aiming to impale him. Arthur caught the beast mid-charge, twisting its grotesque skull with brute strength until the horn snapped clean off. With a devilish grin, he turned the jagged bone into an improvised weapon, stabbing it into another demon's chest. Blood, thick, black, and burning like acid splattered across the ground. The demon screeched, its body convulsing violently before going still. Arthur barely spared it a glance before he tore through the rest. His fists, heavier than warhammers, caved in skulls. His kicks shattered spines. His movements were raw, unrelenting, a symphony of destruction, played with nothing but sheer strength and will. By the time the battle settled, the ground was littered with twitching, broken bodies. The eerie silence returned. The mist swirling around Arthur, like it too, feared him. Constantine let out a low whistle, stepping forward. "Well, that was something." Mate, you just beat the unholy hell out of demons, with your bare hands, and a bloody horn. Arthur rolled his shoulders, exhaling. His hands were soaked in demon blood, his knuckles bruised but unshaken. He let the moment settle before whispering a single word. Arise. The shadows twisted, the very fabric of limbo shuddering at the command. One by one, the fallen demons twitched, their bodies convulsing unnaturally. Their once dead eyes reignited with an eerie glowing darkness. Constantine's eyes widened. Oh, bloody hell! The demons, now bound to Arthur's will, stood before him, awaiting their master's command. Constantine let out a sharp laugh, shaking his head. Even necromancy, huh? You really are mad. Arthur simply smirked, looking over his new soldiers with satisfaction. Mad? He turned to Constantine, his eyes glowing ominously. No, John. I'm just getting started. Constantine exhaled, taking in the battlefield Arthur standing tall, his new shadowy minions kneeling before him in eerie silence. The sheer weight of his presence made even the twisted remnants of limbo recoil. John lit a cigarette with a flick of his fingers, taking a slow drag before shaking his head. Right then. I get it now. His tone was softer but carried a knowing edge. Arthur glanced at him, raising an eyebrow. Get what? John smirked, exhaling a stream of smoke. That a bloke like you, you're someone like me. He gestured vaguely at the lingering specters in the distance. I thought maybe showing you the souls of the unfortunate would rattle you a bit, make you hesitate. But nah, you don't feel remorse for evil, so why bother? Arthur simply smiled, running a hand through his blood-matted hair, adjusting his coat as if he'd just finished a casual spar rather than a massacre. Now I like you a bit more. Constantine chuckled dryly, flicking his cigarette into the abyss. Yeah, you're a right charmer. But we've spent enough time in this hellhole. Those were only minor demons. We're 11. He reached into his coat, pulling out a small, engraved pendant, an artifact humming with eldritch power. The moment he muttered an incantation, the air twisted, reality itself folding inward. A blinding light swallowed them both. Limbo faded, and just like that, they were gone. The air twisted, one last time as the teleportation sigil faded, leaving Arthur and Constantine standing in the middle of his dimly lit living room. Raven was waiting. Arms crossed, hood down, her gaze flickered between the two men. The moment she saw them, she frowned. How did it go? Arthur, still dusting off the last remnants of limbo from his coat, grinned. Well, I enjoyed limbo. I'd love to go back sometime, maybe find stronger demons. Raven's eyes widened. Limbo? Her voice was sharper than she intended, and she immediately turned to Constantine, expression tense. I thought you said you'd only teach him how to control his darkness, his magic, and his powers. Constantine raised a hand lazily, as if already bored by the conversation. Yeah, about that. He glanced at Arthur, then back to Raven, taking a long drag from his cigarette before exhaling. Turns out, the bloke doesn't need guidance. Limbo didn't so much as scratch his mind. Strong enough to not be affected. Not bad, eh? He smirked. Raven's frown deepened. Constantine, clearly done with the conversation, stretched his arms. Well, that's my cue to leave. You two play nice. He turned toward the door, then paused, looking back at Raven with a lopsided grin. Take care of little Artie, yeah? Or maybe he should be taking care of you. Hard to tell with this one. Arthur chuckled, watching John disappear into the night, leaving only the faint scent of smoke and magic behind. Arthur suddenly felt a familiar sensation of his entire body surging with newfound strength. Then, the system's cold, mechanical voice echoed in his mind. You leveled up? You leveled up. You leveled up. Arthur exhaled slowly, rolling his shoulders as raw power coursed through him. His muscles tightened, his senses sharpened. Every fiber of his being felt enhanced. A slow grin spread across his face. New equipment obtained. Abyss forged necklace. A dark, minor demon-crafted necklace, reinforced with infernal energy. Grants defensive stats and resistance to corrupting influences. New item obtained. Key details will be given once certain conditions are met. Arthur looked down as his casual clothes shifted. The Abyss forged carapace wrapping around him a dark, segmented armor with faintly glowing runes etched into its surface. The weight was perfect, The fit's seamless. He smirked. Not bad. Looks like Limbo left me a parting gift. Glad the armor and necklace are invisible, though. Otherwise it would look ridiculous. Raven, still watching him closely, narrowed her eyes. Hello? Arthur? Arthur flexed his fingers, feeling the power thrumming beneath his skin. Raven, now I'm ready to work with you guys. Not officially joining, so I'm not taking any sort of test or blood sample or whatever Robin asks. I just need to fight you, see, he admitted, inspecting the cryptic key that had appeared in his hand. The system refused to reveal its purpose yet. If your offer still stands, that is. Raven's eyes softened, and there was an unexpected warmth in her voice when she spoke. It always stood, Arthur. I've been wanting this. You can't keep running around on your own. If you stay isolated, someone like Batman will eventually be on your tail, and you won't be able to fight him off by yourself. Arthur's expression hardened for a moment, but he remained silent as the thought echoed in his mind. He would do that anyways. That man already has plans to neutralize all of you. If anything happens, it would be the same for me. He looked back at Raven, locking eyes with her. We'll see. The door swung open with a soft creak, and Arthur's heart skipped a beat. His eyes widened in realization. Shit, he whispered under his breath. Raven, standing beside him, gave him a sharp look. Shit, she said in sync, both of them frozen for a moment. There was no time to react, no time to escape. Without a word, both of them rushed into the closet, cramming into the tight space, the shelves digging into Arthur's back. Raven's body pressed against his, their faces uncomfortably close, her breath warm against his ear. For a second, they both stiffened, unsure of how to handle the sudden proximity, but with a shared glance, they quietly adjusted, trying to make themselves as small as possible. Arthur's mind was racing. So that's him, he thought, watching from the gap in the closet as the intruder entered. His older brother, Adam Blackwynd, with his sharp calculating gaze and air of authority. Raven, however, wasn't paying attention to Arthur at the moment. She was staring at the figure, her eyes narrowing as if something clicked in her mind. Wait, she murmured. I've seen him somewhere before. Arthur barely resisted the urge to curse aloud. Great, now she's thinking too much. The silence stretched between them, both trying not to breathe too loudly as they observed Adam pacing around the room. Raven squinted, her thoughts racing. Where have I seen him before? She muttered again, eyes flicking back to Arthur, suspicion rising. Arthur, trying to keep his composure, gave her a brief, reassuring smile, but his heart was pounding. This is too close. Is that your brother? Raven asked in a low whisper, still trying to piece it all together. Arthur didn't answer immediately, his thoughts still scrambled. I guess. Yeah, that's him, my brother, he said quietly, wondering what exactly Raven might make of this. Adam muttered from the other side of the room, pacing back and forth. Well, where did that idiot disappear to? His voice was filled with frustration, and it made Arthur's blood boil. He clenched his jaw, irritation flickering across his face. That idiot? He wanted to shout, wanted to confront his brother right then and there, but he stayed silent, breathing deeply to control the urge. The last thing he needed was his brother discovering he wasn't alone. Raven, however, wasn't as skilled at hiding her curiosity. She turned toward Arthur, her brow furrowed. Why are you hiding here anyway, Arthur? It's your house, she asked, her tone casual but a bit too sharp, clearly noticing his agitation. Arthur sighed, rubbing his forehead as if the whole situation was a hassle. I don't know. He trailed off for a moment, eyeing her. He then smirked, his irritation mixing with a hint of dry humor. Can't you just open a portal or something? Or are you enjoying this? Let's just leave. Raven, slightly flustered by the suggestion, snapped her fingers. Right? Why didn't I think of that? She grumbled, clearly embarrassed, her arms crossed. She shot Arthur a sharp look, her face flushed with mild frustration. It's not like I'm enjoying it, okay? Arthur bit back a grin. Right, he thought with amusement. But before he could tease her further, he heard a small creak. Adam paused in his searching, head tilting slightly toward the closet. He'd heard something, and his instincts kicked in. What was that? He took a step closer to the closet door, hand hovering near the handle. Arthur's pulse raced. No way. Not now. Before Adam could open it, Raven swiftly raised her hand, her eyes narrowing. A portal shimmered into existence, silent but swift, sucking them both in with a force so smooth that they vanished before Adam could catch sight of them. Adam blinked, standing in front of the now empty closet, confusion settling over him. "What the hell?" he muttered under his breath, stepping forward to open the door. But as he did, there was nothing. No trace of anything. Meanwhile, Arthur and Raven landed softly on the other side of the portal, and the tension between them lingered, both still adjusting to the sudden shift in the air. Arthur sighed in relief. "That was too close. We almost got caught." "Almost got caught doing what?" Starfire's cheerful yet slightly confused tone rang out. Arthur's head snapped up to see Starfire, her vibrant red hair flowing in the air like a halo, standing with a bright, innocent smile. She tilted her head, her wide, curious eyes scanning the pair before them. Behind her stood Beast Boy, in his usual green form, grinning from ear to ear, Blue Beetle leaning casually against the wall, and Robin, arms crossed, his sharp eyes focused on Arthur. Arthur felt a wave of heat rush to his face as the room seemed to freeze for a moment. Raven, ever the calm one, immediately rolled her eyes and sighed. "We weren't doing anything," Raven said flatly, shooting Arthur a sidelong glance that made him feel like he should have said something more convincing. Arthur, always one to run with whatever nonsense was thrown at him, opened his mouth to retort but then quickly realized no witty line would get him out of this one. Yeah, just a very urgent training session," he muttered, the sarcasm dripping from his voice. Starfire's eyes sparkled with innocent curiosity. "Training session?" She looked to Raven for confirmation. "But you were so very close together. I did not know you two were training in such a way." Arthur choked on his own breath. "What? What?" he sputtered, his face going redder than a tomato. "This is how I'm going to be introduced to these guys?" "Training, yes. In the arts of magic," Raven quipped, crossing her arms and looking at Arthur with that unmistakable deadpan stare. Beast Boy, who had been snickering quietly in the background, immediately burst out laughing. "Dude, I gotta admit, that was smooth. You two sure you weren't hiding some other kinda training?" He wiggled his eyebrows exaggeratedly, earning an exaggerated groan from Arthur. Robin, still watching the whole scene with a narrowed gaze, uncrossed his arms, taking a step toward Arthur. "So this is Arthur?" His tone was serious, but there was a glimmer of amusement in his eyes. Arthur looked over at Robin, feeling a sense of wariness as he nodded. "Yeah, that's me. Arthur Blackwynd. Nice to meet you, I guess." Blue Beetle, who had been observing the whole thing from the corner, finally spoke up, his voice light-hearted and curious. "So you're the mysterious guy Raven's been keeping an eye on? Guess you got some serious skills, huh?" Arthur smirked, a bit more at ease now that the tension had somewhat broken. "You could say that. I've got a few tricks up my sleeve." Starfire smiled brightly, clearly unfazed by the earlier awkwardness. "Then you must be quite skilled." "You seem to have much potential, Arthur." She clasped her hands together in delight, her enthusiasm practically glowing. Beast Boy, never one to miss an opportunity to poke fun, grinned. "So you two, huh? You and Raven, do you have a secret training? Buddy system or something?" Raven's gaze softened just a bit, but she was quick to throw in, "This isn't some sitcom, Beast Boy. Stop reading into things." Beast Boy threw his hands up in mock surrender, grinning ear to ear. All right, I was just checking. No need to get all defensive." Robin, still serious but with the faintest hint of a smirk, cleared his throat. "All right, enough with the jokes. Arthur, welcome to the team, though. Don't expect a free pass just because you've made an impression on Raven." He glanced at his teammates, then at Arthur. "You'll have to prove yourself, just like anyone else." Arthur took a step forward, his tone firm. "I'm just going to make one thing clear. I'm not going to be part of your team. But I will aid you because I want to fight." Robin narrowed his eyes at Arthur, clearly weighing his words. "So let me get this straight. You don't want to be a Titan, but you'll fight alongside us when it suits you." His voice was calm, but there was a hint of skepticism. Arthur nodded, crossing his arms. "That's right. I don't do teams, I do battles. If there's a fight worth my time, I'll be there." Robin exchanged a glance with Raven, who simply shrugged. "That's his condition," she confirmed. Robin exhaled sharply, rubbing his temple before looking back at Arthur. "Great. Another loner with a hero complex," he muttered under his breath. Then, with a small smirk, he added, "Fine. As long as you don't get in the way, or cause more trouble than you solve, I'll allow it." Just don't expect us to bail you out when things go south. Arthur narrowed his eyes, watching the way Robin rubbed his temple in frustration. I know you don't trust me, Boy Wonder, but that's good, you shouldn't. A smirk tugged at the corner of his lips as he met Robin's gaze head-on. I wouldn't have it any other way, Arthur said, his voice edged with amusement. Robin stood at the center of the room, arms crossed, his gaze sharp. Well, you're in luck, Arthur. We've got something to do tomorrow. Arthur raised an eyebrow. Yeah? Robin nodded. We've received intel about a peculiar shipment heading towards Metropolis. It's being transported through the Steel Point docks here in Jump City before it gets rerouted to LexCorp. Arthur sighed, already knowing where this was going. Of course. Had to be Luther. Robin smirked. He turned to the team. Titans, we'll head out at... Shit! Arthur suddenly interrupted, rubbing his temple. The whole room went silent, everyone looking at him. I totally forgot about school, Arthur muttered. I've already missed quite a lot. For a moment, there was silence. Then, Beast Boy burst out laughing, and soon, the entire room followed. Even Raven, who covered her mouth slightly but still chuckled. Dude! Beast Boy grinned, pointing at Robin. Who do you think funds that school? Arthur blinked, then narrowed his eyes at Robin, realization hitting him like a truck. Wait a damn minute. Robin just smirked, arms crossed. Beast Boy cackled. Come on, man, we all skip. Well, except Raven, 'cause she's a nerd. Raven shot him a glare, deadpanning. I can and will teleport you into the sun. Arthur, meanwhile, pieced everything together. He sighed, shaking his head. Of course. Wayne Enterprises, he thought to himself. No wonder Raven said I wouldn't be the first with powers there. Robin just smirked. Now you're catching on. Robin folded his arms and gave Arthur a measured look. We head out at dawn. Get some rest. He turned slightly, motioning towards the vast interior of the tower. It's big enough. Make yourself at home. Just don't go snooping where you shouldn't. Arthur smirked at the implied warning but simply nodded. Got it. Thanks. With that, he turned and left with Raven and Beast Boy, the sound of their footsteps fading as they walked through the tower's sleek hallways. As soon as they were out of earshot, Cyborg glanced at Robin. You don't trust him, do you? Robin's response was immediate. Nope. Arthur took in his surroundings as they moved through the tower. It was a modern marvel, sleek steel and glass, reinforced, yet designed for comfort. The dim lighting of the hallway cast elongated shadows along the walls, the soft hum of hidden technology filling the silence. Even without being attuned to it, he could feel the security measures in place. Cameras, motion sensors, maybe even something mystical woven in by Raven. They weren't careless. As they walked, Beast Boy shifted forms every few seconds, a hummingbird zipping past Arthur's face, a snake coiling momentarily around his arm before dropping off, then back to his usual green-skinned self. So dude, since you're pretty strong, maybe we should spar sometime? Arthur gave him a side glance. You heard that, huh? He turned to Raven, crossing his arms. So much for not reporting about me to the Titans. Raven sighed, unfazed. I only mentioned a tiny bit about you. Beast Boy laughed. Yeah, well, that tiny bit made Robin put you on his potential threat list. He elbowed Arthur playfully. That's kinda impressive, man. Arthur smirked, but didn't reply. He had expected as much. They finally stopped in front of a door, and Raven gestured toward it. This is your room. Arthur stepped inside, taking in the space. It was simple but well designed. Dark walls with neon lighting strips lining the corners, a spacious bed, a desk with a built-in interface, and most importantly, a massive window overlooking Jump City. The city lights twinkled against the night, and the reflection of the T-shaped tower in the water gave a sense of both isolation and dominance over the skyline. Arthur let out a breath. Not bad, Robin. You think I can't see the cameras and the security you have here? This is more of a prison cell than a room. Beast Boy leaned against the doorframe, still grinning. Sue! About that spar! Arthur gave him a deadpan stare. Beast Boy threw up his hands. All right. Tomorrow after the mission, then. Raven, already turning to leave, glanced back at Arthur one last time. Get some rest. We have work to do. Arthur smirked. Looking forward to it. As the door slid shut, He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. His body still thrummed with residual power from limbo. Arthur leaned against the edge of his bed, rolling his shoulders as he exhaled. The faint glow of the city lights outside his window flickered in his peripheral vision, but his mind was elsewhere. Can't let Robin see what I can truly do, especially while I'm still not strong enough compared to what the JL have. He knew how people like Robin operated, analyzing, calculating, preparing countermeasures. If the Titan leader saw too much too soon, Arthur would become a liability rather than an ally. Not yet. Let them underestimate me for now. With that thought, he pulled up his system interface. A transparent blue screen materialized before him, casting an ethereal glow across the dimly lit room. His stats unfolded in neat lines of text. Name: Arthur Blackwynd. Job, Soul Warden title: Bane of the Unworthy, plus 20% attack against those who harbor evil intent. Level 46. Fatigue 0, 46. Strength 101 to 104. Health 85 to 88. Agility 51 to 54. Intelligence 110 to 122. Isbidi 1. Free lendable. Job-specific skill, Shadow Extraction. Skills: Bloodlust, Level 1. Equipment: Azarath Knight Armor Set Abyss, Forged Necklace. Inventory: Great Sword of the Lowborn. Arthur flexed his fingers as he felt the subtle shift in his body, his muscles tightening, his reflexes sharpening, and his mind becoming even more attuned to the shadows. The added intelligence gave his magic more weight, and the increased agility would make him more fluid in battle. A slow smirk crossed his lips. This should be good enough for now. Closing the interface with a mental command, Arthur leaned back against the headboard, arms folded behind his head. Arthur said to himself, "I can't wait to go all out." Arthur stirred as something, or rather, someone, shook him violently. A voice pierced through the veil of sleep, dragging him back to the waking world. "Yo, wake up, dude, we're rolling out!" He cracked one eye open to see Beast Boy's grinning face looming over him. The green-skinned shapeshifter was practically bouncing with energy, shifting between different forms. A dog, a cat, a monkey, before settling back into his usual self. Arthur groaned, running a hand down his face. "What time is it?" "Time to go kick some bad guy ass," Beast Boy chirped. "Come on, man. Everyone's waiting." Arthur exhaled sharply, sitting up sluggishly. He was still groggy, his body resisting movement. Even with his enhanced stats, waking up like this was still a pain in the ass. His hair was a mess, his shirt was half off his shoulder, and he was pretty sure he looked like he'd been hit by a truck. Beast Boy gave him a once-over and snickered. "Dude, you look like death," Arthur shot him a glare. "Yeah? I mean, you were not far from the truth." Beast Boy just laughed and shifted into a bird, flapping away before Arthur could swat at him. Mumbling under his breath, Arthur rolled out of bed and got dressed. His invisible armor and the minor demon-forged necklace he had earned from Limbo felt comfortably light on his neck, yet he could tell it had decent protection. He threw on a long coat over it, its dark material flowing as he walked toward the common area. By the time he arrived, the rest of the Titans were already assembled. Robin stood at the forefront, arms crossed, radiating that usual brooding leader energy. Starfire hovered nearby, her hair like a cascade of fire against the morning sky. Cyborg was calibrating his arm cannon, while Blue Beetle adjusted the settings on his suit. And then there was Raven, standing slightly apart from the group, her arms folded. She flicked her gaze at him, her expression unreadable. Robin turned to him as he approached. "Took you long enough?" Arthur ran a hand through his messy hair. "Woke up to a zoo animal shaking me like an earthquake. Not exactly a peaceful morning." Beast Boy grinned. "Hey, at least you're up." Robin ignored their banter and got straight to business. "We're moving now. The shipment is being transported through the Jump City docks. Our intel says it's for LexCorp, but something about this feels off. We'll intercept it before it leaves port." Arthur smirked, cracking his knuckles. "Lex Luthor, huh? I can't wait." His eyes gleamed with something dangerous. Finally, something fun. The Titans crouched behind a stack of shipping containers, the salty breeze from the ocean carrying the distant hum of the port's machinery. Towering cranes loomed overhead, their silhouettes cutting into the darkened sky. The port itself was bustling not with dock workers, but was something far more dangerous. Armed guards patrolled the area, their movements sharp and methodical. These weren't just hired thugs. Their coordination, their gear, the way they moved it screamed experience. Cyborg zoomed in with his cybernetic eye. These guys are packing serious heat. We're looking at high-grade assault rifles, tactical armor. I'd bet good money they're ex-military. Arthur leaned against the cold metal of the container, eyes scanning the guards. Yeah, these aren't your average LexCorp rent-a-cops. Well-trained mercs. He rolled his shoulder, resting a hand on the hilt of his greatsword. I'll clear the way. Robin's arm shot out in front of him. No. Arthur frowned, but didn't push forward. Yet. Robin kept his voice low, eyes narrowing as he assessed the situation. We do this right. No unnecessary noise. We need to know what they're guarding before we start swinging. Arthur sighed, but relented. He had to admit, Robin wasn't wrong. This wasn't some random skirmish. Whatever Luther was moving, it had to be important. Robin tapped his communicator. I'll take the front. Starfire, Blue Beetle, stay in position. Cyborg, keep scanning. Raven, keep an eye out for anything off. Arthur smirked. And I'll just sit here and watch you. Robin shot him a glance, but didn't acknowledge the comment. He slipped into the shadows, moving with surprising ease for someone in bright red and green. One by one, he took out the guards, his movements precise and efficient. A strike to the neck, a sweep of the leg, a chokehold, all silent, all effective. Arthur observed from afar, genuinely impressed. He's good. Raven, standing beside him, was less focused on Robin's performance. She frowned, shadows flickering in the depths of her hood. Something strange, though. Arthur immediately tensed. He trusted her instincts and his senses. Yeah, he muttered, his fingers tightening around his sword. There's a weird presence here. The moment Robin gave the signal, the Titans moved in like a well-oiled machine. Arthur rushed in first, meeting a group of mercenaries head-on, his greatsword still strapped to his back. Instead of drawing it, he slammed his fist into the nearest soldier's gut, the sheer force sending the man sprawling backward. Another came at him from the side, swinging a baton. Arthur caught the strike with his bare hand, twisting the weapon free before driving his elbow into the man's jaw. The mercenary dropped like a sack of bricks. Beast Boy, mid-sprint, morphed into a rhino, barreling through a line of guards before shifting back into his human form. Man, this is almost too easy. Don't get cocky, stay focused, Robin warned, flipping over two mercenaries and landing behind them. A swift sweep of his leg knocked them off balance, and before they could recover, he struck pressure points on their necks, rendering them unconscious. Starfire hovered overhead, her eyes glowing bright green as she unleashed a flurry of starbolts. Surrender, she declared, sending another blast into a group of men scrambling to take cover. Please surrender before I am forced to increase my forcefulness. Blue Beetle, his armor shifting in response to the incoming enemies, fired a concussive energy blast, knocking a group of mercenaries against a cargo crate. I mean, she gave you guys a chance, he quipped, his arm cannon still humming. Arthur ducked under a wild punch, grabbing the attacker by the collar and slamming him into another guard. He exhaled sharply, shaking out his hand. He was holding back deliberately so. If he used his full strength, these men would be broken beyond repair. He wasn't sure why he cared, but something about how easily he could kill them made his skin crawl. Cyborg, who had been covering their backs, fired his sonic cannon, sending the last few mercenaries flying. That all of them? He asked, scanning the area. Robin dusted himself off. Looks like it. He turned his attention to the real target, the shipment they had been guarding. It was a large, reinforced container, being loaded onto a cargo ship. A simple glance at the side of it told them everything they needed to know. A bright red LexCorp logo was stamped on the metal. Well, no surprise there, Beast Boy muttered. But Arthur wasn't looking at the LexCorp logo. His gaze was locked on something else, a name printed just beneath it. Blackwynd Science Group. Raven noticed his expression. Isn't that your name? The entire team turned to him. Arthur took a step back, completely bewildered. The hell is this? Robin's eyes narrowed. He didn't say anything, but the suspicion was obvious. Before Arthur could process the implications, Cyborg moved forward, his mechanical hand shifting into a cutting tool. Only one way to find out what's inside. Sparks flew as he cracked open the container, forcing the reinforced doors apart. A sickly green glow spilled out. Cyborg took a step back, his systems already detecting high radiation levels. No way. Inside, stacked neatly in reinforced cases, was a crazy amount of kryptonite. The air turned heavy with realization. Starfire's eyes widened in concern. Beast Boy's usual lightheartedness disappeared. Blue Beetle stiffened, his armor instinctively reacting to the dangerous material. Robin took a slow breath, his gaze flickering from the kryptonite to Arthur. Before Arthur could even form a response, a sharp crack split the air. A sniper round tore through the darkness, aimed directly at his head. But before it could reach him, something moved. A shadow, no, a figure, clawing its way out from the darkness at Arthur's feet. The creature was humanoid, its body wrapped in shifting black mist, its eyes glowing a malevolent red. Jagged, broken horns jutted from its skull, and its elongated fingers ended in wicked claws. The demon shadow moved faster than any human could react, throwing itself in the bullet's path. The round embedded deep into its chest, and instead of blood, a thick, black smoke leaked from the wound. It barely flinched. Its head turned toward Arthur, the eerie glow of its eyes flickering like dying embers. "My lord," it rasped, its voice an unnatural blend of multiple tones, layered and distorted. Arthur's gaze met its own, entirely unfazed. He barely even blinked. He simply sighed, glancing over his shoulder. The moment Arthur's shadow soldier emerged, the Titans froze. Beast Boy's ears flattened as he instinctively shifted back from his animal form to his human one, his wide green eyes fixed on the eerie figure. Ah, what the hell is that? Cyborg's mechanical eye scanned the entity immediately, his systems working overtime to analyze it. "Okay, that thing ain't normal," he muttered, shifting slightly to aim his arm cannon. Robin's body tensed, stepping between the shadow and the team out of pure instinct. He didn't make any rash moves, but his stance was wary. "Arthur," he said, voice low, controlled. "What the hell did you just summon?" Arthur, as calm as ever, merely glanced at the being, then back at them. "Oh, him? He's my soldier," he answered nonchalantly, as if that explained everything. The shadow soldier twitched slightly, its head turning toward Robin, its molten red eyes flickering. It still had the bullet lodged in its chest, but the wound was already closing. Robin stiffened but didn't back down. Raven, however, was the only one who didn't seem particularly shocked. She crossed her arms, watching the scene unfold with a half-lidded expression. "TCH, I knew you had something like this." Arthur raised an eyebrow. "Oh, and what gave it away?" Raven rolled her eyes. "Please, your energy is so dark it looks like mine. The way you fight, there's something unnatural about it. I didn't know exactly what, but I had my suspicions." Beast Boy looked between the two of them, then back at the creature. "So wait, this thing listens to you?" The shadow turned its head toward Beast Boy, and its lips, if it even had lips, pulled into something that almost resembled a grin. "My lord," it repeated in that eerie, layered voice. Beast Boy's skin crawled. "Yeah, nope, I hate that." "Well, you are free to believe whatever you want," Arthur muttered before turning his attention back to where the sniper shot had come from. "No idea why my family's name is on that crate, but I'll deal with it after we handle this." Robin, ever the tactician, followed the bullet's trajectory immediately. His masked eyes locked onto a rooftop overlooking the port. "Up there," he announced, reaching for his grappling gun. The moment he pointed, a figure stepped into the dim lighting, standing at the edge of the rooftop with an almost casual posture. The moonlight gleamed off his signature half-black, half-orange mask. "Slade," Robin growled. Deathstroke tilted his head slightly, lowering his rifle now that his position was exposed. His voice carried with that same cold amusement he always had. "Not bad, kid, but I wasn't aiming to kill," he said, his eyes shifting toward Arthur. Yet, Arthur's gaze locked onto Deathstroke, unreadable and unwavering. The assassin stood above them, poised like a predator assessing its prey. The moonlight cast jagged shadows across the rooftop, making his half-black, half-orange mask look even more menacing. Arthur didn't react, not with words, not with a shift in stance. He simply looked. That silence was enough. From the darkness at his feet, shadows writhed and twisted unnaturally, stretching like living tendrils. Then they took form. One by one, figures emerged. 5, each clad in abyssal black, their bodies shifting like smoke yet unnervingly solid. Their glowing eyes flickered like embers, jagged horns crowning their heads. They stood still, awaiting their master's command, their clawed hands twitching in anticipation. Deathstroke tilted his head slightly, lowering his rifle completely now. His single eye gleamed with something between amusement and intrigue. How strange, he mused. His tone remained unreadable, but there was no denying it. He was watching, analyzing. Deathstroke remained still, perched on the rooftop like a specter of war. The mechanical hum of the port faded into the background as he observed the scene before him. Arthur Blackwynd, standing amidst his nightmarish shadows, was an anomaly, one that piqued his interest. The assassin let out a low chuckle, adjusting his grip on his rifle. "You must be Arthur Blackwynd. What a strange fellow indeed." His voice was calm, measured, but laced with amusement. "And here I thought your family was nothing but a bunch of lackeys, playing at science and politics." He tilted his head slightly, his single eye narrowing behind the mask. "But there's always a black sheep, isn't there?" His words were deliberate, probing, testing for a reaction. "Still, it doesn't make sense why you'd be running with these idiots." He gestured vaguely toward the Titans, his disdain evident. Arthur, still as stone, met his gaze. The great sword resting at his back shifted as he reached for it, his fingers wrapping around the hilt. In one smooth motion, he drew it free, the massive blade gleaming under the moonlight as he raised it with one hand and pointed it directly at Deathstroke. "You'll have to answer a few things for me," Arthur said, his voice cool, unwavering. "Right after I kick your ass." Deathstroke's gaze flickered from Arthur to Robin, the flicker of amusement never leaving his cold expression. He adjusted his stance slightly, a smirk pulling at the edge of his mask. "You really think you're going to stop me?" he mused, his tone dripping with mocking superiority. Robin, the boy wonder turned wannabe leader, and you little master, Arthur. "I can't let you interfere here, you see," he said, his voice cold and calculating. "I've already been paid." The tense air around the dock seemed to crackle with energy as Arthur stood ready, his great sword in hand, shadow soldiers arrayed behind him, prepared for the chaos that was about to unfold. The Titans formed up, on alert, eyes scanning for any new threats. Deathstroke's voice rang out from across the way. "And by the way, I never mentioned that I was alone." Before the Titans could react, the ground trembled beneath their feet. In an instant, the earth cracked, and massive boulders shot up from the ground, shattering the silence. A towering figure emerged from the rubble mammoth, his massive frame blocking out the moonlight as he bellowed in a low, gravelly voice. "Time to crash this little party." Without warning, the ground cracked again, and from beneath, Terra appeared, her hands raised as she manipulated the earth with effortless control. Giant stone slabs shot out from the ground, hurling toward the Titans with terrifying speed. "You can't run from me," she sneered, a wicked grin playing at the corner of her lips. Arthur's expression hardened as the battle broke out, but before he could make a move, a swirl of pink magic erupted in the air. Jinx, standing nearby, grinned mischievously as she released a bolt of pure chaos energy. "Can you handle bad luck, boy?" Beast Boy's eyes widened in shock. "Wait, aren't these guys supposed to be locked up in prison?" He turned to Robin, who was already formulating a plan. Deathstroke, now casually leaning against a nearby crate, simply smirked. "I set them free, of course." Arthur, eyeing the chaos around him, let out a deep sigh. "Yeah, imprison a supervillain, great idea." His voice dripped with sarcasm, but there was no time for complaints. With a swift motion, he drew his greatsword, his shadow soldiers charging into the fray to engage the incoming threats. As Arthur turned to charge toward Deathstroke, Robin's voice rang out, sharp and firm. "Arthur, wait, you can't just—" But Arthur didn't stop. In the midst of the chaos, he dodged a boulder thrown by Terra and narrowly avoided a chaotic bolt from Jinx. His eyes never left Deathstroke, the assassin calmly observing the battlefield. "Arthur!" Robin shouted again, but this time it was drowned out by the roar of battle. Without sparing a single glance, Arthur muttered to himself, "I'm done with plans for now." His voice was steady, unshaken by the surrounding madness. His shadow soldiers continued to clash with Terra's stone constructs and Mammoth's brute force as he made his way toward Deathstroke. Robin's eyes narrowed, Realizing there was no stopping him now, he turned his attention back to the battlefield. Deathstroke, noticing the shifting tide, began to retreat, a calculated move. His half-black, half-orange mask gleamed as he turned on his heel, disappearing into the night, like a shadow vanishing into the dark. Arthur's voice rang out, filled with deadly intent. "You're not escaping me, Slade!" Deathstroke didn't break his stride. With the same cold precision he always had, he turned slightly, drawing his gun in one swift motion. The sound of gunfire rang out, a series of bullets streaking toward Arthur. But without hesitation, Arthur used his greatsword as a shield with a practiced ease, deflecting the rounds. The bullets ricocheted off his blade, sparking in all directions, but none found their mark. "Impressive," Deathstroke muttered, not missing a beat. He accelerated, heading toward the shadows of an industrial warehouse up ahead, slipping inside like a ghost. Without a moment's hesitation, Arthur followed. The entrance to the warehouse loomed large before him, as the sounds of the battle slowly faded into the distance. Arthur's eyes scanned the room, but there was no sign of Deathstroke, just the echo of his own footsteps and the rhythmic sound of his breathing. "You're predictable, Arthur Blackwynd," Deathstroke's voice called from the darkness, calm and steady, like he had been waiting for this very moment. Rushing in without considering the consequences, Arthur's grip tightened on the hilt of his greatsword. "I've already considered the consequences. You're not leaving here until I've got answers." A low chuckle echoed from the shadows. "Answers? You're just like your family, all of you. Sheep rushing in without understanding the bigger picture, playing a game that is too much for you to handle." Then, in an instant, Deathstroke appeared. A blur of motion, his body, a flash of half-black, half-orange as he lunged forward, his blades coming at Arthur with a deadly arc. Arthur easily managed to raise his greatsword in time, deflecting the blows with a metallic clang that reverberated through the empty warehouse. The force of the strike sent a shockwave up Deathstroke's arms, but his feet stayed firm. "You talk too much," Arthur growled, eyes narrowing. Deathstroke didn't waste a second. His movements were precise, fluid, as if he were dancing with death itself. "Better than talking too little, Blackwynd," he retorted, his voice still steady, but filled with that cold, confident edge. "I'm giving you a chance to learn." The two clashed again, their weapons meeting with a deafening crash. Arthur's greatsword swung in a massive arc, meeting Deathstroke's blades in a shower of sparks. The assassin's movements were fluid, precise, a lethal dance honed by years of training. He was more experienced, his strikes a blur of deadly accuracy. But Arthur was no slouch. Even under the weight of the greatsword, he stood his ground, using his raw power to force Deathstroke back. Each blow Arthur delivered wasn't about finesse, it was about overwhelming force. When Deathstroke's blades flashed toward his chest, Arthur blocked with the flat of his greatsword, the impact sending shockwaves up his arms. Deathstroke's mask gleamed with cold amusement, his voice smooth but laced with that deadly edge. "You're strong, Blackwynd, but you lack control." He pivoted, his blades coming down at Arthur's exposed shoulder with lightning speed. "I don't need finesse," Arthur growled, his voice low and dangerous. "I've got too much strength stats, you see." Arthur surged forward, pushing his body forward with a grunt, and slammed his shoulder into Deathstroke's chest. The force sent Deathstroke skidding back, barely managing to keep his balance. The assassin's eye flashed with recognition, but before he could react, Arthur pressed the advantage. He grabbed the front of Deathstroke's armor with one hand, lifting him off his feet. Deathstroke's eyes widened slightly, the only hint of surprise visible beneath his mask. Arthur didn't give him a moment to recover. He slammed his fist into Deathstroke's midsection, a brutal strike that sent shockwaves through the assassin's body. Searing pain shot through his ribs. A wet, guttural cough tore from his throat, and a splatter of blood dripped onto the ground. He wiped his mouth with the back of his glove, his single eye narrowing in cold fury. "TCH! All that power, and not an ounce of skill. No class." Deathstroke sneered, his single eye locked onto Arthur, sharp with disdain. Arthur smirked, blood dripping from a cut on his lip. From his shadow, a shadow soldier slithered quietly, slipping toward Deathstroke's own shadow. Arthur smirked. "It's over for you, Slade." And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously appreciate it if you could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out a lot and keeps me going. Plus, it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.